Hello, hello. My name is Clarence, also known as Ariakas, on the A Song of Ice and Fire Discord servers, and I'm your guest commentator today on today's Battle Report, a game that I played for the Team Super League. A bit about why I'm doing this. I am a huge fan of the A Song of Ice and Fire stats webpage and their YouTube channel, and I really enjoyed Carlo's battle reports. It reminds me of chess analysis. I've started playing chess myself this year, and a piece of advice that one of my good friends who plays a lot of chess gave me was to look over the games that I've played and to think about each move that I made and why did I do it. So I found Carlo's battle reports very similar to think about the game beforehand and talk about the game afterwards as well. I found that there was a lot of learning to be done. So I wanted to create a video that's similar to that. I think it could be good for new players who are learning about strategy and tactics, and it could also hopefully be good for experienced players as well. It's an exciting time because the game is in a new edition and things are still kind of shaking out. And I don't pretend to be the best player in the world or the best Baratheon player, so I'm looking forward towards insights and comments from other players and feedback. So let's look at my lists, my opponent's lists, and where the game went. So let's take a look at the two lists that I brought to the event, and maybe talk a bit about the design philosophy behind how I build lists for Song of Ice and Fire. So a bit of background behind the event. So this is for the Team Super League that is run by George from 3 Sales Gaming. It's a fantastic event that I highly recommend that you check out. Check out his YouTube channel, check out his website. Basically, the idea is that you're on a team of 4 players, and your team faces off against other teams. You get matched up, and then depending on your win-loss ratio at the end of the league, your group might move up a division, might move down a division. So there's a bit of stakes involved, which is pretty cool. I had the fortune of being on the Knights of the Old World in Division 1, and my teammates include Captain Larks from Germany, Marsara/Foryoku from Poland, and ex-Jon Snow groupie, also known as Brett Lanford from the States. And since I'm Canadian, we have a kind of a cool international team going on here. I was the 4th and last member to be recruited to the team, which meant that I had last pick on factions. So quite predictably, the top 3 factions at the time, which were Night's Watch, Targaryens, and Lannister, got snatched up by my teammates, and after a quick team discussion, it was decided that I should play as Baratheons. It's interesting how it shook out, because today Baratheons are the bottom-ranked or maybe second bottom-ranked faction, depending on how the games go over the course of the weeks. But honestly, I don't really feel at a big disadvantage playing one of the worst ranked factions in the game. The reason is because I think if you look at not Night's Watch and not Mother of Dragons, I actually think that the other factions and commanders are quite competitive versus each other, more or less. And I think that player skill can even out any kind of power disparity. It's only against Night's Watch and Mother of Dragons where I feel right away that the game is going to be an uphill battle, that I'm at a disadvantage. So otherwise, I think the game is quite competitive, and I don't feel at a big disadvantage. So I knew that I was going into a meta where there's going to be a lot of Night's Watch, a lot of Targaryens, and a lot of Lannisters. So I decided to build 2 lists that would hopefully be able to take those 3 factions on well. So my first list is led by Stannis One True King. And this list was designed to face off against Lannisters, who are well known for their panic damage. The thing that was kind of setting everyone off was the Lannister Redcloaks, who have this great rule called Lannister Justice. Basically, with the inclusion of Joffrey and CU, they can always force a panic test at -3 if they perform an action within 12 inches of one of your units. Even good morale armies with morale 6 are testing at a 9 and taking D3+1 damage, so that damage can really add up. So the basic philosophy behind this list was try to resist that panic damage as much as possible. So if you look at my 5 combat units, I've got Wardens, 2 Dragonstone Nobles, Faithful, and the Bastard Girls. The Nobles both have morale 3, which means that testing at 6, they have good odds to pass. The Faithful have a base morale of 4, which means that 7, they're pretty likely to pass. And then the Bastard Girls have morale 5. The Wardens have 6, but they're accompanied by Stannis One True King, who gives them essentially +1 to their tests, so it's kind of like they have morale 5. Now, morale 5 at -3 is 8, which means you're likely to fail, but you're allowed to put down terrain, choose terrain for this event, which means that if I put down a weirwood tree in my zone, then my morale 5 units can effectively be morale 4, and then they'd be testing on 7. So that was the idea, is try to resist that panic damage as much as possible. Now, what else does Stannis One True King bring to the table besides that Iron Resolve for the +1 to the panic test rolls and a -1 wound? So let's look at his cards, and then we'll talk about what he does in his unit, etc., etc. So here is the tactics deck, and Stannis One True King brings 3 cards, as most commanders do. The first card is in R'hllor's Name, and I really like this card because it gives another alpha strikey offensive card into the Baratheon deck. Right now, there's really 2 offense cards, directly offense cards, which are Ours is the Fury and Sustained Assault. Ours is the Fury, great card, great when charging. Sustained Assault, not so much good on the charge, better in the second or third round of the fight where you're grinding away at your opponent. So it's nice to have another offensive card when you're charging in that gives you crit blow or sundering. Now, something very interesting about this card is that if you don't destroy your opponent, you must take a panic test at -2, which seems like a penalty. The reason why it's not always a penalty is, first of all, your units tend to have good morale, the ones I've chosen in this list. And secondly, I've taken Celise and Shireen in my army. What she does is she gives one of your units +1 to their morale when she influences them. But more importantly, when you pass morale, you'll deal a wound to your opponent. So if you don't finish off your opponent with In R'hllor's Name, and you pass that panic test, you'll deal an extra wound. That could finish your opponent off, but more importantly, it's just providing extra chip damage. So Celise and Shireen's a running theme in this list, and she's quite the linchpin, I'm going to say. So watch out for those panic tests. They're not negatives. In my opinion, they're positives because you'll be dealing extra damage to your opponent, which leads us right into Test of Faith. Test of Faith, I'd say, is overall Stannis' weakest card. You get 1 extra save from 1 attack, which is okay. But again, you have to suffer a panic test. So if you pass with Liz and Shireen, you get to deal that extra wound. And what's great about this card is the trigger. It's the start of any turn, meaning you don't have to use it when you activate. You don't have to use it when your combat unit activates, that is. So if you, let's say, charge in with the R'hllor Faithful, do a bunch of damage, but don't finish your opponent off, later on in the round, if they take additional damage from, let's say, Bastard Girl shooting into combat or Crown Zaps, and they're down to 1 last wound, you can play this at the start of their turn or your turn, hopefully pass the panic test with Sleaze and Shireen attached to you, and finish them. So that's where I see the value in this card, really, is that extra wound that it can just deal out of nowhere. And his third card is Azor Ahai, and this card lets you minimize panic damage, which might seem weird since the army has such low morale to begin with. You might think, if you're passing all your morale tests, this card's a dead card. But as many players know, you're not going to pass all your morale tests. The reality is, even with morale 4, morale 5, you still roll snake eyes, you still roll low once in a while and fail. But secondly, there's modifiers. There's things like vicious, there's things like horrific from the corpse piles. So these modifiers can really add up and force even a morale 3 unit, such as your Dragonstone Noble, to fail. So it's nice to have a failsafe where either you auto-pass if you're a R'hllor unit, or you only take 1 damage to minimize, those critical fail panic tests. The side effect, if you're, your R'hllor, enemies become panicked, is also nice as well. So a decent toolkit, I think. In R'hllor's Name, great offense card. Azor Ahai, good card because panic is a real thing in this meta, with dragons and Lannisters running around. And Test of Faith, not a great card, but can provide a surprising wound out of nowhere that your opponent may not expect. So now, into the actual list. When I build a list for A Song of Ice and Fire, the first thing I try and do is maximize my activations while still taking good quality units. So I find that no matter what faction I play, I try and get to 8 activations and have at least 1 or 2 strong units in that. Maybe it's the Stark player in me from 1.6, but I really find that I rely on activations to gain advantage of my opponent. And I'm not the only one. One of the best predictors of your list success according to the stat site is how many activations you have relative to your opponent. So I always try and aim for 8. The second thing that I do when I build my lists is I would like to include some sort of range control in my list. And what range control is making your opponents think about where they maneuver and march. If they can just maneuver and march freely and not worry about you, I feel like they have too much leeway on the battlefield. So I like to restrict their movement by including either an archer unit or cavalry or maybe even both. When you plop down archers on the table, all of a sudden your opponent has to stop and think about where they can maneuver their units. They'll say things like, oh, okay, so archers are there. You can shift 2. Your range is 12. That gives you a threat of 14. They'll measure out where 14 inches is, and that becomes a no-go zone for the early maneuvering. So I really like that because it forces your opponent to slow down and just not get to move at the pace that they would like. Cavalry has a very similar effect. Cavalry can move typically 5 inches, and then you charge 5 plus d6, which gives you a reasonable threat range of, let's say, 13 inches. So often people will measure 13 to 14 inches out just to make sure that they won't get alpha struck by your cavalry. And if you have Davos in your list, as I do, he gets you a reroll as well, meaning a 14-inch charge, which is a 4+, with a reroll is actually pretty reliable when you've got Davos on your team. So I like to include at least one of those two things. The third thing that I like to do when I build a list for A Song of Ice and Fire is have a fairly cheap command bunker for my leader, for your commander. And the reason for this is, while there are a lot of attractive units in the game, in Baratheon's example, that could be Stag Knights or Rose Knights, something like that, they're also expensive at 8 points and 7 points. And often, in many scenarios, your commander ends up just sitting on an objective and camping on it. If you look at a scenario like Game of Thrones, Hone and Ready, if you look at things like Feast of Crows, very often commanders deploy on the opposite sides because they want to play safe and just hold on to their objective. So I don't like to invest a lot of points if I can. So having said that, let's look at how I incorporate that into my One True King list. So starting off with my command bunker, I've got good old Baratheon Wardens. So Baratheon Wardens are nice and cheap. They're 5 points, but they have a fantastic defensive profile with 3+ armor and a decent morale of 6. Their offensive stats are nothing to write home about, and they're slow movement 4. But their defense is enhanced by Stannis One True King, who provides them Iron Resolve, as mentioned earlier, gives them +1 to their morale, so they're more likely to pass, and -1 damage from panic tests, which means that if they do fail, they might take only 1 or 2 wounds, or maybe even 0 wounds, because there's no minimum damage done here. Panic test could be you suffer 1, and then -1 brings it down to 0. Dauntless is also good too. If you were to pass that panic test, you heal a wound back, gives him a bit of surprising sustain, and he makes his own unit Rawlor. That's relevant because some of his cards work only on Rawlor units or work better on Rawlor units. So he makes his tanky unit even tankier, which is really nice. One rule that I tend to forget with Wardens is their Counterstrike rule. So this is actually significant because it can deal a surprising amount of hits back to your opponent. I guess I'm kind of stuck in 1.6 mentality where you take Wardens for the 3+ save, and I forget often about the Counterstrike, which is a big deal because their Warhammer rule, where you can make your opponents weakened, really synergizes with that. So I'm going to hopefully remember to use that rule during my game. The next 2 units that I take are a pair of Dragonstone Nobles. And I really think Dragonstone Nobles are one of the reasons why you take the Stannis side of the Baratheons. They're your only source of a cheap 4-point combat unit activation. Now, taking 2 is a bit risky because they are fragile with only 3 wounds, and they really don't hit that hard with 3 attacks with Sundering. So they actually are a bit of a weak point in the line sometimes. So the way I use them to get maximum benefit out of them is to pick their targets very carefully. I make sure that I send them at units that are going to have a hard time cracking that 2+ save. So I try to avoid units that have Sundering. I try to avoid units that can make me vulnerable, for example. And very often I've had this 4-point combat unit tie up a much more expensive 8-point cavalry unit, such as Flayed Men or Champions of the Stag, or they've tied up Stark Berserkers with a Mormont Veteran. They hit on 4s with, 7 attacks, I believe. So that's not likely to break through this 2+ save and 3+ morale. So if I can tie up an expensive unit with my cheap unit, I can bring more points to bear on the rest of my opponent's army. So that's their goal, is to tie up expensive units. And in some situations, such as Game of Thrones or Hone and Ready, they might camp on an objective and hold and score points for me because they're cheap, which again lets me bring more points onto the center of the table. A little known rule that people miss also on the Dragonstone Noble is the solo rider rule. So most cavalry can maneuver before they perform their action. The Dragonstone Noble, along with I believe Jorah, can perform a retreat as well. It gives you some very interesting tactical options. One very common way to use it is to simply retreat from combat, charge back in to get the charge bonus. But you can also do things like retreat out of combat, march onto an objective, retreat out of combat, march into a position where you block your opponent. So it gives you some maneuverability that your opponent may not suspect. The next two units are the real damage dealers in the army. So the first one is the R'hllor Faithful. And when I first was looking at units, these didn't really stand out to me at all. At 6 points, they hit on 4s. That's a big deterrent. They are kind of squishy with a 5+ save. But after trying them out, I found that when you combo them with the Red Priestess and Sleaze and Shireen and Stannis' cards, they can really do a lot of damage. So what makes this unit great is that they start with a Faith token, and very commonly you're going to use this Faith token to gain Vicious and Precision on your attacks. Now, if you have a Red Priestess, what she does is when you make an attack, you get to make a panic test, you suffer 1 wound, and then your opponent becomes vulnerable and panicked. So when you stack those 4 keywords together, precision, vicious, panicked, and vulnerable, that can really augment their damage quite a bit. Plus, every time you pass this panic test, you generate a Faith token on yourself as well. Now, if you combine that with Sleaze and Shireen, remember, every time you pass panic, your opponent takes a wound. So very often, what happens is you'll charge into combat, Sleaze and Shireen's already attached to you, or you start the round in combat, Sleaze and Shireen goes onto the swords, you influence your unit, you perform your attack. They'll take 1 wound from the Red Priestess panic test because you have Sleaze and Shireen, and then you get to hit them with those 4 keywords stacked on top of each other. If you have another card in hand, such as Ards of the Fury or in R'hllor's name, that can really cause a shocking amount of damage that people may not expect. Now, even though they are squishy with their 5+ armor, they do have 4+ morale, which means you're only really taking damage from physical attacks normally. They can fail. Don't think you're never going to fail, but usually you're only taking damage from physical attacks. One other rule that is often underestimated is their first bullet point, where if you have a destroyed rank, you can spend a Faith token to deal 3 hits to your opponent. What I found that is in one-on-one combats, as you're both knocking each other down, that deals extra hits, which can give you the edge and finish off your opponent before they finish you off. So again, something that I sometimes forget to use, but hopefully I'll remember in my game to come. The last unit I have are House Bolton Bastard Girls. And the reason why this was chosen was because I wanted a range unit for that range control, as I mentioned earlier. And at 7 points, I really had 3 options. I had Stormcrow Archers with Brawn, I had Lightbringers, R'hllor, which might seem to fit the theme, and I had Bastard Girls. Now, I admit I really practiced a lot with Stormcrow Archers and Brawn, and the reason for this is they just have such great support shooting. Brawn can take the Wealth Zone, provide an extra shot with Sundering. If you grab the Sword Zone, you get rerolls and a second shot. So it is very tempting to take that unit. But what I found was this list was meant to play into Lannisters. And this is the one unit at Morale 7 that had bad morale. So if my opponent focuses their Lannister Justices on this unit, they quickly crumble and die. So I figured R'hllor Lightbringers have Morale 6, which is better, but testing at -3, you're still going to die. So I wanted a unit that had better morale. So that was the main reason to choose the Bastard Girls at Morale 5. But Bastard Girls are an excellent unit. I thought they were pretty good in 1.6, and they received straight buffs in 1.7. So yes, they provide extra shooting, but they also provide you another combat unit as well. So, the charging volley... So the shot into the charging volley, that's essentially 10 attacks that hit on 3s. There's panic, there's a vulnerable token involved, there's vicious damage involved. And because I have 8 activations, often I find I can get the last activation of the Bastard Girls, shoot, charge, deal a bunch of damage, and then go first next round, take the swords, and finish unit off. So they really have a lot of burst damage that people may not expect. Now, my 3 NCUs to support my list are Davos, Sleaze and Shireen, and Tycho. Tycho is really quick to explain why. He's a bit of a safety net. If you take a lot of damage, and really 2 of my 5 units are squishy in the form of R'hllor Faithful and the Bastard Girls, healing 5 wounds is a great way to prevent them from dying, or to sometimes push you up a rank to get extra dice to fight with. The second one I've talked about to death is Sleaze and Shireen. There's so much panic happening to my own side. To be able to pass more often and to deal wounds out of it is great. Plus, her second ability, Necessary Sacrifices, has come in clutch in certain games to really slow down the tempo of my opponent. So yes, you sacrifice an activation in this case, but it lets you sometimes keep a very vital unit alive on the table. And because I've got Tycho, you can even heal that unit up and kind of just cancel any momentum your opponent might have been gaining. Ideally, you want to use her towards the end of the game, hopefully even the last turn where the victory is more or less secured if you keep a unit alive. If you lose her in the beginning, it's a big blow because you are losing tempo because you lost an activation. But, hopefully you can play conservatively and make that happen. The last NCU that I'm taking is Davos Seaworth. So Davos, I think, is one of the most powerful NCUs, potentially in the game at 4 points. So first of all, he lets you reroll charge dice. One, it makes your charges obviously more reliable. Even if you're automatically in, but you want to play your cards, being able to reroll a disorderly charge is big. It also makes charges that are a bit more risky, such as 3+ charges or 4+ charges, even 5+ charges, much more reliable. I wouldn't recommend that you take a 5+ charge with a reroll and think that it's reliable necessarily, but technically it's in your favor. It's a 55% chance to pass, so it's not as bad as it sounds. But where his NCU comes in super handy is his second ability, where you can shut off enemy tactics and orders. And I find that this second ability is sometimes misunderstood by opponents because they feel like you must start engaged with your opponent, and you don't. You use it when your unit activates, and as long as you make that charge in, your opponent will be engaged, which means that unit cannot be the target of orders or tactics cards. So it's great for turning things off, such as Shield Wall, Set for Charge, Lannister Supremacy, but more importantly, it's great for turning off cards, and the one card I'm thinking about in particular is Fire Made Flesh for dragons. So it's a bit like a Winter's Coming that is guaranteed with 3 tokens. So Davos, extremely powerful NCU, very flexible. So that is the philosophy behind my first list. Now, let's take a look at my second list. So my second list is also Stannis. It is Stannis, the rightful heir. Now, as I mentioned, the first list was designed to face off against Lannisters, and it turns out after a lot of practice, it's actually not bad as a generalist list as well. So meaning if I play against Starks, Neutrals, other Baratheons, that was kind of my go-to list. So my second list has to be able to deal with Night's Watch and Dragons. So that's tough. That's tough to go into. So I had a lot of help from my friends, and we said, okay, when you play against Night's Watch, the reason why you can't really run a list like this is because of the Dragonstone Nobles. While they're cheap and while they provide you extra activations, against Night's Watch, the Scorpion just demolishes them. So you can't bring a solo because they'll get wrecked by the Scorpion. So and against dragons, the dragons one-shot them automatically as well. So your opponent, the things that I'm fighting against, ignore armor, and they also usually have the vicious keyword attached to them. Scorpions are vicious, dragons are vicious, and the Stone Thrower can have the serrated enhancement card attached to it, which makes it vicious as well. So if I'm going to have attacks that ignore my armor and probably make me fail panic tests, maybe I don't want to pay for armor and things that have low morale. Things that Baratheons can do quite well, unfortunately. So that's where the choice of Hedge Knights comes into play. So Hedge Knights are cheaper heavy cavalry. They only cost 7 points versus 8. And the reason why they're cheaper is because they have less armor and they have less morale. But again, I'm already assuming that those are kind of useless stats in the matchups I'm going into. So that's okay. What's great about Hedge Knights is they have a very aggressive attack profile with 7 attacks hitting on 3s with Sunring built in, And if you control the swords, your opponent becomes vulnerable as well, which is very relevant against things like dragons. So right away I said, okay, let's take 2 hedge knights. I can't take a third because that takes me over the limit. So I took Champions of the Stag instead. And the reason why I'm taking cavalry is because against Night's Watch with all their crossbows and against the war machines, you want to be able to close the distance in theory and get into combat. Versus dragons, who are extremely mobile, it's nice to have your own mobile units that can react to your opponent's movements and countercharge as need be. I take 12 points of NCUs, again, to maximize that activation advantage if I can. And that leaves me with 6 points left over. And with 6 points, you don't have a lot of choices, and the one that I ended up taking were Stormcrow Archers, which might seem odd for a commander bunker. The thing is, though, if I'm playing the Night's Watch and to dragons, having a unit of wardens as my bunker really doesn't do anything for me. A lot of the attacks ignore the good armor of the Baratheon, of the wardens, and they're too slow to react to dragon maneuvering. So you're a sitting duck, essentially. But if you take Stormcrow Archers, it gives you the opportunity to shoot those dragons. If you're facing against Night's Watch and your cavalry are rushing down their crossbows, they're not shooting at your archers, and that lets you add in some extra chip damage. So that was the reason behind the archers. Now, again, I also think Stormcrow Archers in general are just a good buy. Even without something like Bronn or Peter Baelish, you're still taking important zones on the battlefield, and that's going to buff up your Stormcrow Archers. So that was the philosophy behind the list. Let's look at what does Stannis, the rightful heir, bring to the table. So card-wise, he brings 3 cards. The first one's Will the One True King. It's great because if you're going first and you have the last NCU activation, you're going to take the crown typically, since it's generally the weakest zone. And it lets you instead put down a bunch of tokens, which are very relevant. The tokens, not only are they handy just in a combat sense, trigger a lot of Stannis' other cards as well. And against dragons, you really want to make things vulnerable, and you may want to panic or weaken maybe Dany's bunker, for example. But even more tokens on a dragon is not a bad thing, because again, it lets you trigger other cards like Tactical Approach, for example. His second card is Harsh Conditions, which is a very powerful card. When you remove a token, it lets you cancel an enemy ability. This is not so great on dragons, who are all, I think the word is innate. All their abilities are innate. But it's good on things like Watch Captain Crossbows, because it lets you cancel the Relentless rule, for example. Or if you put it on Dany in Unsullied Pikemen, it lets you cancel out Set for Charge or Shield Wall. So it's got a lot of utility if you know what ability you want to remove from your opponent. And the last card is Tactical Approach, which lets you deal extra wounds in melee. So this card, again, synergizes with the fact that, Stannis himself makes tokens, Will of the One True King makes tokens, but it's also very good on Champions of the Stag, who create a weakened token when they attack too. So it's good for dealing that extra bit of damage to dragons in particular. Stannis himself, as kind of mentioned, has 2 orders. Mark Target lets you put down a vulnerable token, and later on, you can change that token into something else through adaptive planning. And to use Stannis, the rightful heir, very well, I find, you need to be able to juggle these tokens effectively. Because since you're always adding on vulnerable tokens, you really want to be changing them via adaptive planning. And don't forget, you can add on these vulnerable tokens through other means, such as Stormcrow Archers, if they have the envelope zone, or the tactic zone, or just by taking the tactic zone itself. So a good Stannis player is going to always be juggling and changing around the tokens that you place down. Talked about all these units. And lastly, the NCUs. So Davos is back for the very same reasons I took him in the previous list. Rerolling your charges, canceling tactic cards and orders is huge. Alistair Florent was chosen because of the Night's Watch matchup. So Night's Watch want to control the money bags. Money bags enhances all the awful cards. So on a turn where they go first, and they typically put Peter on the money bags to take a free attack on the attack zone. On your activation, your counter is to take the attack zone and then swap so that you now control the money bag zone. And that's relevant for Hedge Knights, because Hedge Knights then gain that extra pip of armor against crossbows, and they gain that extra pip of morale as well. In practice, I found that it really wasn't as great as I thought it would be. And the reason for that is because if they took the wealth zone with Peter and activated the attack zone, they've already gotten off one powerful shot with the crossbows or the scorpion or whatever. When you counter by putting Alistair on the swords, like, you have to do it because you can't get shot again for free, but that NCU activation really doesn't do anything. It's not like taking the tactic zone where you draw a card. It's not letting you maneuver. So you're essentially passing your turn and just robbing them of a critical zone. The sad thing is the awful cards still do things even without the wealth zone. Hone Enhancement, for example, still provides +1 attack dice. So the Night's Watch Crossmen still throw 8 dice. So it's not as oppressive to the opponent as I thought it would be. Lastly, I'm taking Shire Errol. So Shire Errol was chosen because I miscounted how many points I had left for neutrals. Because I took Double Hedge Knight at 14 points and Stormcrow Archers, I've actually maxed out my neutral allocation. I wanted to take Tycho Nestoris for that extra burst heal, but I'm not allowed to. So the only choices left over were Shira or Alistair Florent. Axel Florent. So Axel enhances panic damage, and that really is not the goal of this list at all. So Shira provides a bit more utility because when she takes the tactic zone, she can remove a token. When she takes the crown zone, she can heal a wound. And that extra little bit of healing is what really sealed the deal and made me take her as my third NCU choice. So again, this is my list taking into Night's Watch and Dragons. Because I'm facing off against Free Folk, I don't think I'll be using this list, but it'll depend on really what he has, and it's possible if he takes maybe a monster heavy army that I might take this. So let's now take a look at my opponent's 2 lists. Okay, so now let's take a look at my opponent's 2 Free Folk lists. Now, from the get-go, I want to say that because I've played against a lot of Night's Watch, Targaryens, and Lannisters, I've not played a lot against Free Folk. I have played a few games, so I know a bit about them. So all the interactions may not become apparent to me just by reading their lists. So his first list is led by Star Commander. And when I look at my opponent's list, one of the first things I do is I look at how many activations they have. So he's got 5 combat units with a bunch of attachments and 3 NCUs. So that's 8 activations total. Right away, I'm liking this pairing, since I'm likely to bring my One True King list, which also has 8 activations. It's interesting that in 2021, armies have kind of normalized towards 7 or 8 activations, whereas once upon a time, there was a much greater gap, and you'd see maybe 7 versus 10, or even 7 versus 11. So it's very sort of comforting to roll into Free Folk when they have the same activations as you. So looking at his units, I see a variety. I see Then Warriors, I see Free Folk with Raid Leaders, I see Spearwives, the Matriarch, and I see I guess a bit of a Death Star with the Bone Lord's Chosen and Rattleshirt. I imagine that this is going to be the clutch unit that I have to worry about. Now, in my few games against Free Folk, I noticed that variety of units is good because it lets you get a lot out of coordination tactics. So this card down here, I find, is one of the most powerful cards that the Free Folk have. It essentially lets 2 units share abilities and kind of like Death Star unit up. So in particular, I'm looking at Spearwives and the Bone Lord's Chosen. Spearwives have an excellent rule called Coordinated Assaults, where when they charge in, they deal extra hits. So it gives you a lot of burst damage that you may not be expecting. So if Bone Lord's Chosen, for example, charge in with their decent attack profile, they might be dealing an extra 3 hits, plus dealing panic damage. Or vice versa. It could be the Spearwives taking a shot, charging in, but having Vicious, having Rattleshirt's Intimidating Presence, and having Rattleshirt's Spread Fear rule. So it lets an innocuous unit really gain a lot of powerful abilities that you may not have seen coming. So gotta look out for possible coordination tactics combos since my opponent has a lot of variety going on. Things like sharing Taunt even can be very useful on a cheap unit of Raiders, so something to keep in mind. So he's got Star Commander, and honestly, I haven't seen a lot of Styre. So let's take a look at his cards. This is one thing that I think is important to research. Be aware of what your opponent can do. So I see that Star has Final Strike. Final Strike is in the Baratheon deck, so it lets him bounce back damage, essentially. So this can be very deadly because he does have some squishy units. In fact, most of the units are pretty squishy. And I also have squishy units that deal a lot of damage. So, for example, if my Bastard Girls or my Rawler Faithful crash into Free Folk Raiders, deal 8 or 9 wounds after panic, they will take 8 or 9 hits back, and that is a bad trade because my units cost way more than his units do. So something to be aware of. And what's nice is that because I've got Davos, I can play this. I can use one of his tokens, that is, to negate Final Strike from kicking in at a critical time. His second card here is Stand Defiance. It looks like a defense card, which lets him reroll panic tests or auto pass him potentially. But on Star's unit himself, I will take damage based on how many ranks have been destroyed. So it makes attacking Star a bit more dangerous. So I have to be aware that it means that I can't always rely on panic damage going through, and I don't necessarily want to be attacking into Star's unit itself. And lastly, we see Star's Vengeance. This is a revenge card where if I kill a unit, they put a token down, and that unit gets a benefit. The benefit in this case seems to be pretty minor, where I become vulnerable. Like, that's nice, but not necessarily hugely game-changing. So now looking at his list, I see that his commander is in a unit of Thenn Warriors. And Thenn Warriors are as durable, really, as Free Folk get in terms of physical offense. They have a 4+ save and a decent morale of 6. This kind of reminds me of my own unit of Wardens with One True King, because Styr also brings Iron Resolve, meaning these Thenn Warriors really have morale of 5, and they're going to take less panic damage should they fail. They also have the Unyielding rule, which is kind of like what Stark Berserkers get, meaning as they have less ranks, they'll take even less panic damage. So what's interesting is that combined with Iron Resolve, on their last rank, they can actually not die from panic, unless you have ways of dealing extra wounds via panic, which Baratheons really don't. Now, the other ability that the Thenn Warriors bring, of course, is Taunt. Taunt, many players think this is kind of like a meme, but I think it actually can be very useful if you drag your opponent off an objective, or in this case, since you can share it with another unit via coordination tactics, maybe a unit of Raiders pulls one of my key units into combat, which might get surrounded by my opponent and killed as a result. So it's no joke, something to worry about, something to think about. Again, my One True King list does have good morale, but at -3, you can still fail with a bad roll. Next, we see a pair of Free Folk Raiders with a Raid Leader. So Free Folk Raiders haven't changed too much. These are the base unit for the Free Folk, really. They don't have a great stat line, but they are insignificant, so they don't grant points, and they have the adaptive rule, so they get an attachment for free. So these Raid Leaders are actually free attachments. Now, the Raid Leaders are really important because they give gang up to the unit. So if you're tag teaming, they get +1 hit and +1 attack. Well, guess what? Free Folk Raiders then have 7 attacks hitting on 3s. That's pretty respectable if they are ganging up on an opponent. That's a decent attack profile. And what's nice, again, is because they're insignificant, you don't mind throwing them into combat to tie things up, to block charges, because you know that you don't give away points when they die. The other important thing about Free Folk Raiders is that their morale has gone up to 7. When it was 8, when they took wounds from combat, you expected them to fail and take more damage. Now I expect them to pass. Morale 7 isn't the best in the world, but statistically, you are more likely to pass than fail. They do have the disorganized rule, so it's kind of like the old panic where they take 1 extra wound from panic tests. But again, you're failing less of them as well. And his last 2 units are, I'd say, probably the linchpins in terms of damage dealing, which are the Spearwives and the Bone Lord's Chosen, which I've already kind of talked about. So the Spearwives are kind of like a mini version of Bastard Girls. They have a range attack and charging volley, so they can shift to shoot 6 inches and then charge into combat and deal extra hits via coordinated assault. All that adds up, especially when you look at some of their cards, like Overwhelming Assault. That can actually do some real damage. They have a Spearwife Matriarch attached, which I think is a cool attachment in this case because I don't normally value Swift Retreat too much, but if they get attacked, they can retreat away for free, which frees them up to shoot and charge into combat again. So I can see where that can be very handy. And lastly, we already talked about the Bone Lord's Chosen, which is, I think, the real, power unit in this list. Good attack profile with 7 attacks hitting on 3s. And most of the damage comes via panic. They've got Vicious, they've got Horrific Visage, and they've got Sustain via Prey on Fear. All of this, of course, is enhanced via Rattleshirt. Rattleshirt's Intimidating Presence, which I honestly think is one of the best rules in the game in terms of pushing damage, which means that when you're taking that Vicious test, it's actually at -3, and at full ranks, the Horrific Visage is at -4. And should you fail, you're taking extra damage as well. So very, very scary. And again, shareable via Coordination Tactics as well. Spread Fear is cool. It's kind of like Splash Panic. If your opponent fails this panic test, which they're likely to do so, another unit within long range must make a panic, and there's modifiers based on how many remaining ranks the Bone Lords have, and they take extra damage too. So very, very panic-heavy damage. His 3 NCUs are Val, Craster, and Mance Raider. So Lady Val is an excellent 4-point NCU because, again, in the 3 versus 3 matchup, the first player, assuming they go to the tactics board first, will also get the last and 5th zone on the board. This is typically the Crown, as mentioned earlier, because the Crown has the least impact, only dealing D3 wounds should they fail. So Lady Val is completely fine with replacing that to give you a much more powerful maneuver or retreat. She's also been buffed so that if the unit retreating was engaged, the enemy becomes vulnerable too, which is a subtle way to push more damage through. So a very powerful way to gain more board presence via the tactics zone. Next, we got Craster. Craster has changed a little bit. He still replaces to heal 2 wounds and draw a card, which is awesome. But he also now has a bit of burst heal where you can once per game heal an extra 2 wounds. It's kind of like a mini Tycho in a way. It might save you from dying. It might push you up a rank to get more attack dice. So something to remember that my opponent's units aren't necessarily as crippled as they look even after the tactics board has been filled out. Especially with cards like Regroup and Reform, where they can also transfer wounds over. This is not an order, so it would stack with that. And lastly, we've got Mance Raider. So Mance Raider I've not seen very often as an NCU because typically he's the commander that I face off against. So he's kind of got a old school Courtney Penrose effect where he influences a unit, and every time they're targeted by the tactics zone, you can draw a card. I don't know how useful this is because you have a hand size limit of 5. But I do know that players in general are playing more cards, so maybe this is neat to cycle through and really make sure that you have the right cards that you want. Again, my experience versus Mance is pretty low, so I'm interested to see how this plays out. His next list is led by Mance Raider. So first thing I do is do a quick count. So he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 combat units and 3 NCUs. So that's 9 activations. Right away, I'm not very happy because I'm out-activated. Being out-activated is a big deal in the game because it means that your opponent always gets the last say. It means their best unit probably is always going to have the last activation. And if they go first the next turn, they also have the first activation. And in this case of 9 versus 8, if I go first, my 8th activation is going to finish first. So then they do their 8th activation. Then they do their 9th activation, and if they go first, they get to take the first activation that round, which means that they have 3 activations that are uncontested. So that is an awful feeling for me, because that was me in the last edition playing as a Stark player. So I'm already nervous about fighting this list. So let's look at the contents real fast. We see Followers of Bone, Free Folk Raiders, the Spearwives, and the Cave Dweller Savages. So again, a nice variety of units to really take advantage of coordination tactics. So let's take a look at Mance Raider and see what he brings to the table. So Mance Raider brings 3 cards, and I've played these before, and they're very, very powerful. The first one is the one that I hate the most, Wilding Diplomacy. So when an NCU activates, when an enemy NCU activates, if they claim a zone, horrible things happen to you, essentially. You're going to gain a token, and one of your units takes D3 plus 1 wounds. That is terrible into this matchup for me, because I'm likely to bring my One True King list, which has 2 Dragonstone Nobles, which only have 3 wounds each. Wilding Diplomacy is likely to kill them should I take a zone. So this gives them very good control over the tactics board. And honestly, my opponent wants to save this card for a critical turn, or I'd want to take the Sword Zone right away, or take the Moneybags possibly. So this is a key card to hold on to a key turn. I hate this card. It's a great card. The next card is powerful as well, predictable maneuvers. So they choose an enemy combat unit or an NCU, and if they do anything this turn, they get to do something before, which is an attack, retreat, or maneuver. So, the attack can be strong, and attacks are always strong, but it's the maneuver or retreat that really worry me, because I'm already outnumbered, and to have them encircle me even more via this can be very powerful. So it's possible again that I have to pick something else. The problem is that you can play this towards the end of the round. It doesn't have a restriction that your opponent must have X amount of unactivated units like it did before. So if they play this towards the end of the round, that last unit may not be able to perform an action unless I want them to continue wrapping around me via free maneuvers. So another very powerful card. And lastly, you've got the Long Plan. This card is great. It just lets you cycle through, and it even lets you potentially draw a key card as well. So just great for cycling overall. So that's Mance Raider. Again, the two cards that I'm most worried about are Wilding Diplomacy, because it gives them so much control over the tactics board and on the table as well. So now let's look at how his units work together. We've got Followers of Bone. This is kind of like a mini version of the Bone Lord's Chosen. They have those nice keywords for Panic, Vicious, and Horrific Visage. And again, just something that you may want to share with your opponent. Now, Mance Raider himself brings something very powerful to the table, which is his Inspiring Presence and Rally Point. He makes his own unit Morale 5, and all units within short range Morale 5 as well. So what typically happens, I've seen, is that you'll have Mance Raider kind of leading from the back. He'll have 3 combat units in front of him, he'll be in the middle behind them, and all those units, including his own, now have Morale 5. You don't often see him leading from the front and the middle, because he only then influences units adjacent to him. But that's interesting because in this case, he is in an aggressive unit of Followers of Bone. I've seen Mance in things like Trappers, for example, and Trappers have no problem hanging from the back. The units in front kind of push forward, and then the unit in the back may capture an objective. But in this case, with Followers of Bone, an aggressive unit, I wonder if he's going to go up front and center. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. Now, his second ability is also very powerful, Counter Strategy. It's kind of like a mini counterplot that only works within short range, also works in orders as well. So these two abilities kind of are in conflict sometimes, because if you're behind your army supporting 3 in front, you're not often in range of Counter Strategy. If you're in an offensive unit like Followers of Bone, you will be in range of Counter Strategy more often. So again, I'm very curious to see where he puts his commander's unit. We've already talked about Free Folk Raiders, just great supporting units with the Raid Leader attached onto it. His third unit has a Cave Dweller Alpha. This is interesting. It adds Insight, which is vicious, and high attack value. Again, I think variety is good. As good as Raid Leaders are, having this ability and using coordination tactics can be useful at a key moment. We've got the Spearwives, already talked about those, and we've got the Cave Dweller Savages. So these guys are kind of like Stark Berserkers. They're mobile and movement 6. They have built-in Sundering. Fragile with bad armor but good morale. And as their attack profile as they take more damage, their attack profile increases and they hit better as well. So it's interesting. This unit is actually one you want to fight and not damage. When they're at full ranks, they're at their weakest state with 6 attacks hitting on 4s. That's maybe 3 hits with Sundering, nothing too crazy. But if you bring them down, they can get quite nasty with 8 attacks hitting on 2s with Sundering. So something to be aware of. Don't attack this unit unless you know you can finish them off, which will be very difficult for me since I will rarely get the last activation. And my Bastard Girls could do work, but he will always have me activate them first before he activates this unit. So he can always be sure to stay out of range. So it'll be tricky to see how can I take on this unit head on. His 3 NCUs are Lady Val, already talked about, Styre, and Ygritte. So Styre has changed since the last edition. He now gives a unit +1 attack and Sundering. This is good. It gives you Sundering on a stick, as you might call it, so any unit can get it. And if you're influencing a unit that is benefiting from Gang Up, now they're getting +2 attacks. So Free Folk Raiders with Gang Up and Styre influencing them, as long as you're tag teaming, are now throwing 8 dice hitting on 3s with Sundering. That is pretty darn good. And lastly, we got Ygritte. Ygritte can buff her own unit or sort of degrade an enemy unit. It either gives you extra movement for your own guys, ignoring hindering and rough, or it makes your opponent negative 1 movement, and this really charges 1 or 2. So as a Baratheon player, the negative 1 hurts Wardens because they're already really slow. Plus, if you put down the right terrain, things like bogs, it makes them even slower. So Wardens with movement 4 would go down to movement 3. They would march 6, and if they go through a bog, it makes it march 5. Like, that is very, very annoying. But the +1 movement on their friendly units cannot be ignored either. So this, for example, I'm imagining might be put on Cave Dweller Savages to give them a base movement of 7. So I can imagine a turn where, maybe Ygritte takes the horse, she influences the Cave Dweller Savages, they move 7. Later on, you activate Val, replace a zone, they move another 7. And then they can maybe march down a 14, so they moved a total of 28 inches in one round, setting up a cool flank charge maybe. So that is something to be aware of that might occur. So some definite cool movement shenanigans going on with this build. So looking at his 2 lists, I think he's going to play Mance Commander for a couple of reasons. One, as I mentioned, he's got the activation advantage. He's got 9 versus 8. Secondly, my One True King list relies a bit on panic damage via Wishes from the Bastard Girls and Wishes from the Brawler Faithful. Having a morale 5 of base means that he gets to kind of counteract a lot of that panic damage. And the second reason why I don't think he's going to play the Styre list is because his main damage dealer, I believe, is going to be Rattleshirt in Bolnard's Chosen, either through their own attack or through coordination tactics. But most of my units have good leadership, so I will minimize the panic damage that this list is probably going to deal to me. So my prediction is that we're going to be playing off against Mance. It'll be One True King versus Mance is my prediction. Into Fire and Blood. Now, Fire and Blood is an interesting scenario because it's, I think, the only scenario that has 0 objectives, and as a result, you don't really have to engage your opponent. One thing that's nice I'm noticing here is that he has 13 points of NCUs, and my One True King list also has 13 points of NCUs, meaning we've got the same amount of points on the table. So at least initially, no one's at a disadvantage, because if the game goes to a draw, the player who has the most points on the tables wins. In this case, we have a tie. So, there's no reason to completely hang back, as it were. So we'll see. We'll see what he chooses, and we'll see kind of what the plan is going to be. But again, my prediction is that I'll be facing off against Mance Rayder, the King Beyond the Wall. All right, we'll see how it goes. Okay, and we're back. So the game has been played. Let's take a look at my thought process behind my moves. Let's see what was good, what was bad, what was ugly, and there's a lot to check out, so let's dive right into it. So we load the game into the Song of Ice and Fire stats page, and sure enough, my opponent chooses his Mance Rayder list with 9 activations, and I choose my Stannis One True King list with 8 activations. The scenario is Fire and Blood, and if you're not familiar with the scenario, as you can see, you've got these big 18-inch long deployment zones, and there's no objectives on the table itself. Instead, each player marks 2 enemy units, and those units, when they get killed, are worth 2 extra victory points. But they also get a power-up card to help them out in melee usually. Now, if those marked units kill something, they also get you a bonus point as well. So on one hand, you want to keep them protected. On the other hand, you want to make them more aggressive because they have power-ups and they get you points. So it's kind of this challenge of what to do with them properly. As well, when your commander activates, they can make an enemy unit within 12 inches worth 1 victory point more should they get killed. So overall, I think that the scenario really helps me for a few reasons. One, because there's no objectives on the actual table, I'm not really forced to move towards my opponent. And 2, because I've got this only long-ranged unit, I feel like I can put pressure on him to come towards me. I can get some shots off the Bastard Girls, and maybe after 2 or 3 rounds of shooting, maybe around 4, I can get a charge and volley off, kill off a weakened unit, surge backwards, and between Tycho and Sleaze and Shireen, stay alive and eke out a small win. The second reason why I think that this is a good matchup for me in this scenario is that usually one of the Free Folks' advantages is their insignificant rule. So the fact that I can make his crappy Raider units actually worth points when they die is a big boon to me. The Raiders themselves don't really benefit a lot from the power-up cards because they have a pretty weak attack profile, and they're very fragile, so it's not that hard to kill them, and they can become liabilities for my opponent's side. Not only can I mark them through the scenario rules, but my commander can also make units worth 1 point more when they die as well, which really can help negate his insignificant advantage. So let's see how that shakes out. So we dice off for terrain, and immediately I win the dice off. I think about putting down palisades as my terrain piece. And the scenario is a bit interesting because you're allowed to put terrain anywhere you want, as long as it's more than 6 inches outside of a table edge. Now, I choose to put the palisade just outside the deployment zone, and the reason why I'm putting it here is because I'm going to use it kind of like a bunker. So again, my goal is to shift forward and shoot. The bastard girls shift forward and shoot. And if my opponent is very aggressive and comes at me, the palisade will protect the flank of the bastard girls. Secondly, if he's super aggressive, I can actually back up behind the palisade and prevent a front charge from occurring. So it's just there to sort of protect me since I'm numerically outnumbered by my opponent. In response, my opponent is going to throw down a forest, and the forest is placed right in the middle to try and block as much line of sight as possible. Now, unfortunately, I don't feel like the forest does a great job at preventing shooting from happening because he's got 6 combat trays, and he's never going to be able to hide all those combat trays behind the terrain. Secondly, even if there's a key unit that he wants to keep alive behind the forest, it's not incredibly hard to have the bastard girls kind of wiggle to the side and draw some sort of line of sight to any part of his tray. So the forest currently, unfortunately, doesn't do a great job at its intended purpose, I should say. So I put down a palisade on the opposite side. This way, no matter what side I get, I'm going to get a palisade to protect my flanks. And the last piece of terrain that my opponent chooses is a low wall. The low wall is a really good choice for him because it really blunts the damage of a charge. So if you charge over it with the hindering and fortified keywords, you don't get your charge bonus for rerolls, and your opponent gets +1 save. Some of my units are squishy, such as the Bastard Girls and the Royal Faithful, but I do have some durable units in the form of Wardens and Dragonstone Nobles, whereas every one of his units are squishy. So this is going to help him more than it's going to help me. So it's a good choice overall for him. A bog might have been a good choice as well. So we dice off for choice of first player or side. I win the dice off, and I make him choose sides. Now, he actually chooses the side with the low wall, but I think we both hit switch sides at the same time, which is why it's still on my side. But we'll fix that during deployment and correct that. I want to choose first player, who's first player, and I want to go first, because typically in A Song of Ice and Fire, round 3 is the critical moment where units are on objectives, and that's when the swords comes into play usually as well. So I want to make sure that I have the initiative in round 3. I don't really care about it so much for round 1. It's the round 3 first activation that matters to me. So he chooses a side, and when it comes to deployment, the strategy that most players use is to deploy either your weakest units first or your fastest units first. And the reason behind this is you don't want to give away where the strength or power of your units is. So you don't want to throw down your strongest units first. This way your opponent can counter them or run away from them. And you don't want to throw your commander down first either, usually, because for the same reasons. You don't want your opponent to counter and say, okay, your commander's going here, I'm going to kill him with these units, or okay, your commander's here and he's really dangerous, I'm going to go on the other side perhaps. So he throws out Raiders the Raid Leader, which is exactly great, and notice that he deploys very far back from the deployment line. He wants to make sure that if I take the swords as my first action, I don't get a free shot for nothing. So he's playing very, very safe and deploying far back. So I counter by planning out my deployment a little bit. So again, I'm planning on putting Bastard Girls behind this, beside this palisade, and I throw down my Dragonstone Noble. The Dragonstone Noble is one of the weaker units for me. It doesn't really deal a lot of damage. It's only got 3 wounds. Plus, it's the most mobile thing, and I can redeploy it wherever the fight needs to be. He reacts with another unit of Raiders, the Raid Leader, and he puts it behind the palisade, fully intending most likely to move forwards and break it as time goes on. Now, you can see that he's really playing cautious. He doesn't even deploy it behind the palisade within an inch where a sword action could destroy it, for example. He wants to make sure that my Bastard Girls can't deploy behind that low wall and then get a free shot. So he's just, playing super, super safe. So I deploy my second Dragonstone Noble, I believe, at this point. And again, just putting it really far back. We switch sides with the low walls on his side. We check our deployment. We're happy with it as it goes. so nothing changes, and I put down my second Dragonstone Noble. Again, way far back, not in risk, and able to redeploy. He reacts with his third unit of Raiders, and I believe this unit had the Cave Dweller Alpha. And if I was paying close attention to what he's doing here, I should have been able to predict that his two strong offensive units, being either Spearwives, Cave Dwellers, or Followers of Bone, were going to go in those two gaps. So I should have been able to predict how his line is going to be formed. I throw down my Bastard Girls, as I discussed, next to the Palisade, and I'm really happy with this matchup of Bastard Girls across from Raiders, and we'll talk more about that why in a bit. And he throws down his Spearwives. So the Spearwives are put a bit closer to the Bastard Girls, and that kind of makes sense. The Bastard Girls, even though they've got a great morale of 5, only have 6+ armor. So if he's able to get a shot into a charging volley, that could actually be a lot of damage to my Bastard Girls. I threw down Stannis 1 True King to protect their flank, and you can kind of imagine that my Rawler Faithful are going to go to the left of Stannis' unit. Now, I'm putting Stannis in the middle of my forces, but really, I think this is a bit of a misdeployment, and I should have put Stannis closer to the left, closer to the center of the table, closer really to the center of his army. I want to make sure that if he's going to come towards me, that I have the option to mark whatever I want to make them more expensive. So this is a bit of a misdeploy, and I could have really been a bit smarter to deploy a bit to the left. And he throws down his Cave Dweller Savages, and they're very far away from the Bastard Girls, which is good for him because it means that he won't take the extra damage from the attack zone. The 6+ armor from the Cave Dwellers means that they will drop like flies to any kind of shooting. And I throw down my last unit, the Rawler Faithful. Now notice the way I've deployed the Faithful. For any kind of newer players, this is the classic refused flank positioning here. Because he outnumbers me, I know that I'm going to fight him probably, 2-on-1, but I don't want him to get flanks. So I've got the Palisade anchoring one flank, and the way I've angled my Rawler Faithful makes it difficult for his unit to swing around and get to their flank as well. So again, I'm not intending to push forward aggressively. I'm going to try and make him come to me and just wait for him. And his last unit to go down is Mance, Raider, in the Followers of Bone. So he's chosen to go for a very safe deployment, even though the Followers of Bone have an aggressive attack profile with vicious and decent attacks. He's decided to hang in the back and provide his morale aura to the 4 units in front instead. And you know what? That's pretty smart because even though his unit won't be attacking right away or anytime soon, he does have that Coordination Tactics card, which can lend their abilities to the units that really need them. So at this point, we finished deploying, and we're entering round 1. So I choose to be first player, I grab my 3 cards, and we start marking things. So I mark the unit of Raiders across from the Bastard Girls, and he takes the Sundering card as his power-up. Now, this matchup is really favorable for me for a couple of reasons. Now, he really has 2 options. What does he do with his mark unit? Does he move forward into the areas of the Bastard Girls where he's going to risk a charging volley? If he does, he's probably going to use the unit, lose the unit, and I'm going to gain 2 points. His other option is I'm going to mark his second unit of Raiders as well. And is he going to participate with them into the game now that they're worth points? Or is he going to hang back with them? If he hangs back with them, right now he outnumbers me 6 trays to 3 trays and 2 little solos. If 2 of his trays decide to hang in the back because they're worth points and fragile, then I'm only really fighting 4 trays with my 3 trays. And that's going to make life a lot easier for me. So if he pushes forward, I'm happy. I'm going to get those points. If he hangs back, I'm also happy because it's going to alleviate some pressure on my battle line. And in return, he marks my Rawler Faithful, and I choose to take the Weaken card. The Rawler Faithful are a good choice for him because they are squishy as my units go. Even though they've got great morale, they only have 5+ armor. The Bastard Girls, even though they got worse armor and worse morale, have their flank guarded between the Dragonstone Noble and the Palisade, so it's very hard to tag team that unit. I take the Weaken card, so if I attack my opponent, they become weakened, and I choose this because I'm really across from the Cave Dweller Savages, and they have a rule where if they roll 1s to hit, they suffer wounds themselves. So I want to make sure that I give weakens, I can reroll and hopefully get more 1s. And in response, as mentioned earlier, I'm going to mark another unit of Raiders. I'm not going to mark the one behind the Palisade because they're already kind of out of the game as of right now. So I mark the one that's in the middle. That's kind of in the center of his battle line. He takes the Vicious card, which is probably the best one of the cards that remain. Vicious actually might have been a mistake because my guys have pretty good morale, and precision can get through tough armor that I have on the wardens, for example. And he marks my Dragonstone Noble that's kind of exposed on his own, and I take the precision card for myself. So I choose to activate Sleaze and Shireen. I take the envelope, and I draw 2 cards. I also weaken the Capable Savages because, again, I want him to reroll into more 1s. And in reaction to that, he plays the Long Plan by Mance Raider. And what this lets him do is to draw any card he wants from his library, from his deck. And he's got great choices here. He could take Wildling Diplomacy. He could take Coordination Tactics. He could take the Endless Horde. So he's got a lot of great options. He pulls his card out. And in response, I'm going to play Oath of Duty. So my hand at this point, I've got 5 cards, is Oath of Duty, Sustained Assault, Azora Hide, Test of Faith, and Stag's Wit. These cards are actually not bad as starting hand goes. I don't really have my great offensive cards like Ours is the Fury or In Roller's Name, but I've got cards that I can cycle through, so I'm not unhappy with my current hand. I play one of my 5 cards, Oath of Duty. I put it onto the Bastard Girls because, again, I don't expect this unit to be tag teamed and killed, and I feel like they're going to get the most benefit. I'm going to take -1 wound from Panic Test, and I can maybe place a token down. Stannis already suffers -1 wound, so I don't want to really double down on that. I already feel like he's durable enough. So the Bastard Girls get Oath of Duty. He puts down Ygritte, and he influences the Bastard Girls. He plays the card he drew, which is the Endless Horde, and throws down a free unit of Raiders. Now, he puts them way off on the right flank, and, they're going to probably maneuver around the palisade, maybe threaten my flank here for the Bastard Girls. And I don't realize, and I don't understand how incredibly significant playing Endless Horde round 1 is until later on. So because I'm thinking to myself, okay, this unit of Raiders are going to come around and threaten my Bastard Girls in the flank perhaps, I throw down Davos onto the Crown to zap them, deal some damage. He passes the Panic Test though, even the -1, and no damage is taken. He activates Styre. Styre goes onto the Wealth Zone, removes the Weaken token. I put Tycho onto the Swords. He taps Val. Nothing happens from those 2 activations, and we start activating our actual combat units. Now, when it comes to activating your combat units, the most sensible play is to activate your best units last. Even though I am out-activated, I'm going to finish first. I don't want him to have complete free reign, so I'm going to activate my weakest, most insignificant, most irrelevant units right away. So I throw down the Dragonstone Noble, and he's just moving to the flank to shore up that gap. If his Raiders decide to go through that gap, they're going to be blocked by the 2+ save Dragonstone Noble. And in response, he moves up with his Raiders to get behind the palisade, fully intending, I'm sure, to destroy it later on. I activate my second Dragonstone Noble, and I'm just dirtling forward to kind of act as a countercharge unit for All the Faithful. The unit I want to activate last is my Bastard Girls. If I activate them first, he can perfectly calculate where my threat ranges are. Right now, he doesn't really want to push far forward in case he takes a shot for free. So the Dragonstone Noble activates, and you can see that we're kind of moving around funny. It's because I had a lot of lag for my movement, and when I pivot a unit, the grid lines wouldn't disappear, and he would actually have to sometimes help me out and click on the done button. So it was quite annoying, and it made our game significantly longer as a result. So he pushes forward aggressively with his Capable of Savages, and he's safe behind the forest from the Bastard Girls, and he's coming to get some. I react with the Rather Faithful, and I simply activate and pass. I don't... So it seems to me like he's coming towards me. I don't have a reason to come forward, and in fact, I'm even thinking about backing up at this point. But I don't want to tip my hand right away and start retreating, so I want to stay where I am and convince him that I'm actually going to hold the line, or really, if he's going to push aggressively forward, I want to wait until the last second before we can actually fight in combat. So the Royal People activate, do nothing, and he moves forward a bit more cautiously with his marked unit of Raiders. Now, because I could see his measurements here for his movement, I noticed that my commander, Stannis, was actually barely within 12 inches of his cave dwellers. So I activate, I pass, I just sit right there, but I do make them worth one more point when they die. And this was a slight positioning error on his part. He could have gone back literally, a tenth of an inch, and he would have been out of range. He wouldn't suffer that penalty needlessly. So just a little bit of rush movement on his part, he could have definitely prevented that from happening. So Stannis sits still. The flanking free unit of raiders moves forward, and he's checking now to stay outside of the Bastard Girls' shift and shoot. And this is what I mentioned earlier about range control. If I didn't have this unit, he would be way more aggressive, but he doesn't want to eat the shots needlessly. So he's staying a bit further back as a result. So that's the power of a range unit, even a range unit like Bastard Girls who only get 4 shots hitting on 3s. He knows their burst potential and doesn't want to take needless damage. So I do him a favor, and I actually move forward with the Bastard Girls so that next turn I can shoot into his unit of raiders, and he's now going to move the rest of his units. I shift forward 2 inches, I show him my range, this way he can measure precisely, and his Spearwives, his marking raiders activate. The raiders actually decide not to move at all, it turns out, and Mance Raider shifts to the left to provide his aura to 3 of his units here. And then I position my Bastard Girls back. So I feel happy at the end of round 1. At the end of round 1, it feels like he's going to come forward with his cave dwellers. I feel like I can kill that unit, get some points. They're marked. I've got some cards in hand. I don't realize again the significance of this raider unit until a bit later on, but we'll see. We'll see what goes down round 2. So round 2. We're quite far apart from each other at this point. We're sort of just jockeying to positions here, and my opponent, quite predictably, under no real pressure, activates Styre, puts him on the Spearwives, and he weakens my Bastard Girls, and I play my Stag's Wit. Now, the weaken on the Bastard Girls is actually not that significant because they have 2 sets of attacks between their range and their melee attack, and the swords is still open. I can just take a shot with the swords, and that may spend the weaken token right away. But I've got 4 cards in hand. I want to cycle through. I need to drop 2 cards. So I can use Stag's Wit now. I can use Test of Faith, and I can then at least draw 1 new card. So I use it even though it's not necessarily the best use of the card. I just want to cycle through my deck. And in response, I activate Sleaze and Shireen. I put them onto the maneuver zone. And what I'm thinking here is twofold. One, I don't want him to continue to kind of outmaneuver me and encircle me. And 2, right now my Bastard Girls can only shoot the free unit of raiders. And I want to have the option to be able to shoot something a bit more valuable, such as his Spearwives. So I just inch forward and I put myself in a position where shift and shoot can target his Spearwives. And I influence these Shireen onto the Rawler Faithful, predicting that maybe his cave dwellers will charge. So he doesn't want me to get a free shot onto the Spearwives. He activates Ygritte. He destroys the palisade blocking the raiders, and he influences the cave dwellers. This makes them very, very quick now. They've got movement 7. He still has Val, which can let them move 7. So this unit, has some burst movement that's available to them. So I see now that, his left side is got free reign to advance towards me, and I decide, okay, again, I'd like to whittle this side down. I activate Davos. I target the raiders that just destroyed the palisade. They're more than 6-tone Mance, but he passes his panic test again. And in response, he activates Val, throws her onto the Wealth Zone. He doesn't need it, so he replaces it with the maneuver, the free maneuver, and he thinks about, using the cave dwellers, but he sensibly moves his raiders instead. So they're much more cohesive when they move together. There's no real point moving the cave dwellers forward because he's just going to get tag teamed by my units. So he's just having a more of a coordinated assault, as it were. So I'm pretty sure at this point I activate Tycho and just tap, and it's back to him. He moves forward with the raiders, and he's staying a good far distance away. But again, he's just kind of threatening to kind of, tag team my units here. So in response, I decide to activate the Bastard Girls. Now, last round I said I'm going to activate them last, but this round, it's a different story. I'm already in range of his units, and I feel like attacking the Spearwives because they're one of his best units. They're worth a point inherently, and I don't want them to maneuver out of range. So I feel like last turn, he was staying out of my range. He's already in range. There's no real reason now to activate the Bastard Girls last. If he pushes aggressively forward into me, I'm first next turn, and I'm going to get a free shot into a charging volley with the Sword Zone, I believe. So I don't think he's going to push forward just because I've got the Bastard Girls activated. So I shift forward, I take the shot into the Spearwives. I get 3 hits. He fails 2 saves, and he passes the panic, no problem. But he's also vulnerable because of the Bastard Girls. And in response, my opponent moves pretty aggressively forward with his Raiders. And what I realize now is that this Palisade is no longer blocking my flank. And he's, looking to maybe take advantage of that. So the good news for me, though, is that he's attacking from the low wall, which will really negate some of his charge bonus. So I don't want him to get a free charge. I activate the Dragonstone Noble, and I gradually move him into that gap, and I position him so that if he is to charge my Bastard Girls, I can use the Sentinel Order to get a free charge back onto him. And, I'm not that worried, because if he does charge into the Bastard Girls, again, Raiders on their own don't do a lot, and he'll be near Stannis. Stannis can make them worth more, and I can kill that unit, and then I can just turtle up. So I'm pivoting my Dragonstone Noble. I'm measuring, again, I'm having a lot of trouble with the pivoting tool, unfortunately. A lot of lag happening. And with my 12 inches of movement, I can easily position myself where I can get into his flank, but not get charged in the flank myself from this current position. So I angle to make sure that he's still in my front. So my opponent moves his Mark Unit Raiders just outside my shooting range, and that's it. He's got the activating advantage. He can definitely wait for me to use all my units first. Stannis moves forward. He makes the Cave Dwellers more expensive again, and I just protect the flank of the Bastard Girls while checking to make sure that if he was to make it into my Rall of Faithful, I can countercharge into his flank also. So again, this is the power of the activation advantage. He doesn't have to use his Spearwives or Cave Dwellers till after I'm done. So quite sensibly, my opponent is using all his cheap Raiders first. And right now he's checking his Mark Unit. So it looks like he's checking line of sight. Again, he's finding it a little bit difficult to get in a position where I can't see him. And even there, where I can't draw a line, I think my opponent forgot that I can shift forward 2 inches, and I could probably draw a line at that point. So he's considering moving forward into the center here, but after all that thinking, he decides just to kind of hang back. And they activate and don't do much. So it's back to me. I've got my Rall of Faithful and the Dragonstone Noble left. I definitely can't charge him, so I just put myself in a position where if he does charge me, I can countercharge into him with my Dragonstone Noble. So I'm checking to make sure, and it turns out I'm actually way too close, so I back up a little bit. I'm checking the angle. I want to make sure I can countercharge into him while avoid getting my flank charged by that unit of Raiders. So now he's considering his options. If he is to charge into me with the Spearwives, what are my countercharge options looking like? He's checking to see who can I mark with my commander. And he activates Mance, shuffles sideways, just again providing that morale bubble, and passes essentially. So now it's down to my last activation, my Rall of Faithful. And what I decide is, he needs roughly a 4+ to charge me right now. And I don't know why I'm actually this worried, because he's not going to do a lot of damage, and then he's going to be encircled by, my army essentially. But nevertheless, I don't want him to get a free charge and attack, I suppose. So I try to back up. That red line is where he needs a 4+. So I'm trying to make it a 5+ or a 6+ even, to make that charge really kind of undesirable. So again, I'm having a lot of movement trouble. So I actually disconnect from the game. I reconnect to hope that it fixes itself. But the lag issue with pivoting is still there, unfortunately. So I spend a lot of time dirtling and just kind of shuffling. And, it's really, unfortunately, time-consuming. Because of this, this lag issue here. So again, I'm just setting it behind that red line. He needs a 5 at this point to charge me. just making that charge undesirable. Again, I'm hoping to slowly get a shooting advantage and want to delay combat. So at this point, I'm fully activated, and it's now up to my opponent to do his thing. He's got his Spearwives and the Cave Dwellers left, and I'm first next. So he's checking, and he decides, you know what? I don't really want to push forward, and he gets out of Stannis' range. And this is smart on his part. Like, what's the point of pushing forward? I'm first next. I'm going to hit him from 3 different sides, probably. There's no reason to push forward aggressively. So he doesn't. He just hangs back and says, okay, I'm going to wait. And at this point, I'm starting to worry. I'm like, he's not crazy. He's actually being very, very patient. And I'm starting to wonder, am I missing something? And that's when I realize, wait a second, he has more points on the table than me. This is why that Endless Horde round 1 was actually super, super important. So before he activates his Spearwives, I decided to throw Test of Faith down onto Stannis. Again, I had 4 cards in hand. I played Stag's Wit. I'm playing Test of Faith now. I'll be down to 2 cards, so I can draw 1 more. And I do put it on the wrong unit in hindsight. I put so much value in keeping the commander alive because, he can make enemy units worth more. But in hindsight, I should have really put that Test of Fate on the Rawler Faithful. They're marked and they're fragile. That +1 save can really come in handy. So I do pass the test, but I wish I had put it on the Rawler Faithful instead. Also, by passing that panic test, they would gain another Faith token, which can also come in very handy as well. And the last thing he does is he just kind of edges forward with his Spearwives. He's considering, what are my options? If I decide to shift forward and shoot, what's the charge looking like? And, the Bastard Girls really have a big reach. With their new movement of 6 and Davos giving a reroll, they can get some really shocking long-distance charges off. All right, so the round is over, and it's the end of 2, and we really haven't done much. We're just kind of maneuvering around, and he's really slowed the pace down. At the end of round 1, I thought he was coming for me, hellbent. But no, he's decided to slow down. He doesn't, very intelligently, he's not letting himself get encircled. And now I also realize, wait a second, I can't be this passive. He has more points on the table. If the game goes to a draw, he's actually going to win the game. So I'm worried at this point that he might actually back off, that maybe he's luring me in. He's acting like he's going to be aggressive. He's, keeping me at bay. And then maybe late game, he just pulls back and I lose on the draw. So here I make a pretty significant, I'll make a misplay. So I activate Sleaze and Shireen, and I'm fully intending on taking the sword to get another free shot with the Bastard Girls into his Spearwives or into the Raiders. Now, he plays Wildling Diplomacy. And basically, if I take a zone, he's going to be able to deal D3 +1 wounds to one of my units. He'll obviously pick my Dragonstone Noble, which will kill it and score him 3 points. So I can't take a zone. But because I can't take a zone, I also can't put down Sleaze and Shireen's influence onto one of my units. So that is a misplay. I could have easily taken the attack zone with Davos or Tycho, and if he plays well in Diplomacy, at least I only lose the zone. I don't lose Sleaze and Shireen's influence. So I have to activate and just pass. I can't take a zone. And to make sure that I don't get the attack zone, he reacts with putting Val onto the zone instead. And she replaces it for the maneuver. Now he's considering some charges, and we'll look at that a little bit later. He's looking at his options, and instead he decides to push forward with the leftmost unit of Raiders. And this was a real relief to me, because he's now within striking range of both the Dragonstone Noble and the Rawler Faithful. If I can kill that unit, even though they're insignificant, my units are marked and I will still score a point. So at this point, I'm like, okay, maybe he doesn't realize that a draw is a win for him because he's still moving forward to some extent. So the Raiders come forward, and I'm like, okay, I need to attack that unit. I need to pin them in place. I need to make sure that they can't retreat away. I activate I activate Tycho, and I shift just a little bit towards the right. The reason why I'm doing this is A, again, I don't want him to be able to encircle me so easily, and B, I know that I'm out of range of his Cave Dwellers, and I want to put this unit of Raiders on the low wall in range so I can mark them and make them more expensive. Again, I don't need to get a lot of points. I just need I just need 1 point or 2 to make him forced to come to me. So now he's considering charging those raiders into the Dragonstone Noble. And I realized that this is a really not great position for me. I was setting this up to countercharge into him, and I didn't care about getting charged myself. But if he is to charge me and line up that way, which is the only way he can line up, my bastard girls can't support the Dragonstone Noble. They can't see the raiders if they are to connect, and B, even if I could see him, I can't fit because of my own palisade. So I'm not very happy with the situation should he choose to charge me. And he decides, you know what? He felt at risk because he didn't want stands making them more worth another point, and he backs up right away behind the low wall. So in response, I put Davos onto the envelope, I draw 2 cards, I weaken the Cave Dweller Savages, and at this point, my hand is Sustained Assault, Azor Ahai, Stag's Justice, Baratheon Justice, a second copy of Azor Ahai, and Stag's Wit. So I've got my second copy of Stag's Wit, and I've got both Azor Ahais in my hand. I'm not happy about this because clearly no comments are actually happening. I'm not really taking any panic tests. Even if I do take a panic test, I'm not likely to fail. So I'm definitely thinking about dumping one of those 2 cards, and again, to cycle through my hand and my deck. He reacts with Ygritte onto the Moneybags. He influences the Spearwives, and he also heals them as well. So they're now back to full power, and they're no longer vulnerable. So I am really kind of not super happy at this point. Because of Walling Diplomacy, I lost the shot, and he healed up all the damage. It's round 3, and I've actually done 0 damage to him. So my original plan of chipping him down is not working. Now, I also mentioned that I wanted to go first round 3, because that round is normally very significant. And I didn't consider that in Fire and Blood, because there's no objectives, that's not necessarily true. And my opponent has played very cannily. He said, you know what, why am I going to put myself at range? Why am I going to put myself at risk? And he really hasn't exposed himself. Whereas in scenarios like Dance of Dragons and Feast of Crows and Game of Thrones, sometimes you have to expose yourself to get onto those objectives and to get some points. So I'm considering a charge of the Faithful into those raiders, and it turns out that he's 10 inches away, so I'll need a 5+. Now, that's normally terrible, obviously. 1 in 3 chance is not good, but I do have Davos. Davos gives me a reroll, and if you work it out, it comes up to a 55% chance. So technically, the odds are in my favor to make that charge. But you have to consider what happens if you fail. Now, first of all, I'm never going to burst that unit down. And if I fail, he's going to be able to hit me with those raiders plus the Cave Dweller Savages. So I decide that, it's not a good choice. Instead, I activate the Dragonstone Noble, and I decide to charge into them. Again, I want to start chipping them down. I want to start doing some damage to them. If I can kill them with my marked units, I'm going to get a point. Now I make the charge, and on top of that, I spend a Davos token to prevent him from playing distraction tactics. I don't want his Cave Dwellers to get a free maneuver forward. That will easily allow him to flank my Dragonstone Noble. And right now I know that he probably can make it in anyway, but it'll be a bit harder of a charge. So just in case he's got distraction tactics, I play one of my Davos tokens. I'm easily within charge range, so I roll for the Disorderly. I make it in no problem. I throw out some attacks. We're checking distances. It turns out that he needs to roll a 4+ to make it in, and I'm feeling okay with that. So I get all 3 hits, and he feels, looks like 2 saves due to Sundering, but he passes his panic. So he's passed 3 panics now on his base leadership. Now, the Cave Dweller Savages, as I mentioned, are 11 inches away and require 4+ to make it in. Even though he's got my flank and he's got Sundering, so I only have a 4+ save, I'm actually not that worried because he's weakened. With 6 attacks, even if all 6 hit, weaken should drop that down to 3. I've got a 4+ save. I'm pretty likely to pass that test. And I have Baratheon Justice in my hand, plus the envelope, so I can heal those 2 wounds. So I'm really not that worried. If he makes it in, it's going to provide me with countercharge options in the future with the Roll of the Faithful and maybe even Stannis. Okay, so that was my Dragonstone Noble making it in. And again, he heavily activates me. He does not need to do any important actions right now. He activates the marked unit behind, in range of the bastard girls and just passes with them. It's back to me, and I'm within range of the Spearwives of Stannis. I make them 1 point more, and I just shift over. I've got a feeling that the combat's going to shift towards the left. I feel like now that I've engaged his raiders, he feels committed to support them. So I want to move Stannis in a position where he can countercharge next round. He throws down Styre onto the envelope. He influences those raiders, and he targets Stannis with the crown. I pass the panic test. And here's something that I really didn't consider because I don't play against Freefolk very often, is that with Styre's influence, those raiders are actually not too bad. They have 7 attacks hitting on 4s of Sundering. That can actually deal a couple of wounds to my Dragonstone Noble. So it's back to me. And again, I'm already in range of all my important targets, so I don't mind shifting sideways to the left with the Bastard Girls. Again, I'm gradually moving to the left. I take some shots. I kill off 2, and they're vulnerable, and they pass or panic. Again, no problem. In this case, my Raw of Faithful are the most important unit, so I want to activate them last. So he decides to activate with his Raiders, and he shifts over before he makes his attack. I think this is a slight miscalculation on his part. The reason why is by shifting to the left, it allows his cave dwellers to maybe attack me in the front. But if he's charging me right now, I'm fairly certain that he's in my flank. So he didn't need to shift over. Now, the downside of shifting over is that this unit can no longer retreat. Previously, if things were getting pretty bad for him, and it's going to take a long time for the Dragonstone Noble on his own to kill that unit of raiders, he could have retreated. But now he's boxed himself in. He can't retreat to the left, he can't retreat backwards, and it's hard to retreat to the right. So I feel like this might have been a misplay because the space he opened up doesn't actually do anything for his cave dwellers unless he's going to maneuver this turn into my front to provide a front charge next round. That's very, very patient play if that's what the case is going to be. And I'm okay with that. Again, I'd rather take a charge in the front. Obviously, I'll take less damage without the flank bonus. So he swings. He gets 5 hits out of 7. I've got a 3+ save. I failed 2 saves. I'm down to my last wound. I pass panic, and I throw down my Baratheon Justice, which heals up the damage I just took and puts a vulnerable on his own unit as well. I activate the Dragonstone Noble. Again, I want to put myself in a position where the Bastard Girls can maybe support me should I get charged, and I just go in front of the Palisade, where I can also do some countercharging of my own. But I definitely don't pivot like that because that would expose my flank. So I just put myself where I can countercharge and get supported by my Bastard Girls. And he's done. So I'm down to just my last activation of All the Faithful. The Cave Dwellers are more than 10 away, so it's an 11. With Ygritte, he needs a 4+. But again, he doesn't need to do this activation now because I can countercharge with my Faithful. So he's definitely going to activate something else first. He decides to activate Mance. Mance literally shovels forward half an inch and passes. So now it's down to me. And I know that I can't charge him. So I put myself in a position where I can do some damage round 4. I can now either charge the Raiders, or should his Cave Dwellers make it into the flank of the Dragonstone Noble, I can flank his Cave Dwellers. And now at this point, I am fully activated. But at least I have some interesting options going into round 4. So it's now all my opponent. He's got the Mark Unit of Raiders, the Cave Dwellers, and the Spearwives left. And, he's really thinking about the charge. He's wondering, is it worth it? And I think, like I said, even though it's potentially putting him in a bad position if he fails this charge, I feel like he's obligated to go for it because that unit of Raiders, like I mentioned, is trapped. They will eventually die between the Raw of Faithful and the Dragonstone Noble, and I will get a point for it. So he was saying to me, do I decide to play? Do I decide to play? And he decides, I think I need to engage. So he measures it up, and he's also angling himself so that if he fails the charge, it'll make it harder for my Faithful to charge into him. So he goes for it. He needs a 4. He rolls a 1. He fails. He stumbles forward, but he passes his panic on his great morale of 4. So now that he's committed himself to the left, we can see his Raiders also shifting over to the left. And he is first next round, so he's really thinking about what to do with his Spearwives now. His Spearwives can move forward, take a shot with the attack zone at the beginning of round 4, and get a charging volley into my Bastard Girls. That's going to do a shocking amount of damage because it's 4 attacks from the range attack, and then it's going to be 6 more plus 3 automatic hits because of coordination assaults. So my opponent is, considering, thinking about what to do with that last unit. Oh, and he plays Surrounded and Exposed onto the Dragonstone Noble. I play my second Stag's Wit to remove the vulnerable token, and because I have the envelope, I place it onto his Cave Dwellers instead. I consider the Raiders, but they're really too far, I feel, to make an impact right now. So I'm pretty happy with my hand. My hand had been Sustained Assault, Baratheon Justice, double Azora High, and Stag's Wit. I was able to play 2 of my 5 cards. I'm going to dump my second copy of Azora High, so again I can do a little bit of cycling through. So he's now considering, what to do with his Spearwives, and we realize also that if he was to take a range shot at the start of the round, my Dragonstone Noble can actually countercharge into him and deny him his charging volley. So he's doing some pretty clever measuring here, and he knows he's in range for the shot into charging volley. And he's just going to think about where can he position himself so that I have a hard countercharge. So right now, I'm about 10 inches away. That's a 6-inch charge. And he realizes, why even give me that opportunity? So he maneuvers even further to the left. And he considers, okay, I can't countercharge anymore. And he's wondering, if he is to make it in, into melee, what would the countercharge distance be like with the Sentinel Order, I should say, from the Dragonstone Noble? So he's thinking about it, and it turns out it's also a 10. So again, I would need a 6 to make it in. And it's pretty risky for him because that unit of Spearwives, yes, they do a lot of damage. And yes, the swords will be taken, but then he's also in countercharge distance of Stannis and my Dragonstone Noble, so it's a very risky play. And that unit is also worth 1 point more. So after all that is considered, my opponent decides, it's probably a bit too risky to take the shot into charging volley, and he decides just to kind of shuffle a bit towards the left and move where the real fight is going to happen. So we're fully activated now. Again, it's the end of round 3. We're entering round 4. Nothing has died. We've taken a few wounds off here or there, but we were really trying to just produce an advantageous situation. The second I had an opportunity to pin down one of his units, I took it, and now we're seeing the kind of domino effect of that. He's charging his Cave Dwellers in. I'm going to react with my Royal Faithful. He's probably going to throw his Mark unit into combat. That's going to dress Stannis into combat. So at this point, we're going to see some actual fighting happen after all this careful positioning. So I draw my third card, I get another Oath of Duty, and I throw it onto the Roller Faithful. I figure, again, Stannis doesn't need it, and if this Dragonstone Noble dies, I can maybe get some counter damage with the Faithful if I have the crown and I'm able to, get into combat. Oath of Duty is, not the greatest of the revenge cards, as it were. So he goes first. He puts Styre onto the swords. He influences the same unit. They attack. He only gets 3 hits. I fail 1 save, and I pass my panic. This is not that scary. In fact, dealing me a wound means that I'm going to deal 2 automatic hits when I attack back. So I'm actually kind of happy with taking a single wound. So in reaction, I was going to countercharge with my Royal Faithful into the Cave Dwellers, into his flank. But he plays predictable maneuvers, and he chooses the Faithful and Selise and Shireen. And basically, if either of those units does an action, he gets an attack, a maneuver, or a retreat. Normally, again, I'm worried about getting outmaneuvered, but in this case, it's the attack I'm worried about. A second attack with 7 dice on 4s could kill that Dragonstone Noble. So I decided, I can't give him that free attack, and I have to activate something else instead. So I'm looking at what are my best options here, and I want to keep that Dragonstone Noble safe. So I think to myself, let's say I activate him, and I shift over to the other side. can his cave dwellers make it in? And the answer is yes, he can. Even though he can't fit 100 or 50, he can still fit more than half his tray, so that is a legitimate charge. So I say, okay, what if I go into the middle and we check, and indeed he can still barely fit, so that is also not a good option. So activating and fighting is not going to keep my Dragonstone Nobles safe. I'm considering retreat options. Unfortunately, retreating towards the left is going to be very difficult. I need to roll pretty high. Retreating backwards, I can't really get behind unless I roll super high. If I retreat backwards, he's going to be able to charge me in the front with both his units. And if I retreat towards the right, I'm going to be in range of his marked unit. Plus, he still has Val to turn his cave dwellers around and attack me anyway. So I decided, okay, retreat is not the way to go, and I go for the Wealth Zone to heal off the one wound I took from that Dragonstone Noble. That one wound, I figured, might keep me alive. So at this point, I'm expecting him to charge into me. Okay, but there's a lot of zones still on the tactics board, and he feels, I guess, like he doesn't want to commit one of his on the table activations quite yet. So he takes Ygritte onto the envelope. He weakens Roll of Faithful and influences my Faithful as well, and he draws some cards. Now, this is actually a very important move, because the Faithful, their big weakness is that they only hit on 4s. So forcing me to reroll is going to really blunt the damage. Secondly, by reducing my movement by an inch, it's going to make that that charge into this unit actually quite difficult. I believe it turned out to be a 4+. Again, I have Davos, the odds are in my favor, but I don't want to waste an activation should I fail just stumbling forward. So instead, I activate Sleaze and Shireen, and I decide, okay, the charge is too risky. It's within 8 inches, but it's really a 9 because of Ygritte's influence. And instead, I maneuver forward to put myself in a position where I can't get charged, but I can charge into either the Raiders or the Cave Dweller Savages. He takes the last zone with Val, and he uses maneuver to actually move his cave dwellers so that I cannot charge them anymore. We're just checking, and indeed he has prevented me from charging him in the front. And I realize at this point, hey, you know what? I can now, because the gap has narrowed, I can actually now activate this Dragonstone Noble. With his solo rider rule, I can retreat 1 inch. I charge back in. I roll a 1. I don't really mind. I don't need rerolls. I'm not trying to kill him here. I hit all my attacks anyway. And he fails all his saves. He passes his panic once again. But more importantly, because I'm positioned here, he can no longer attack my flank with the Cave Dweller Savages. And I'm slowly grinding down this unit of Raiders. So in response, I still have an NCU left, I realize, that I've not used yet. He activates the unit that just got attacked. He rolls 7 dice. And, I believe I take 1 wound there again. And I pass my panic. Now, in hindsight, I wonder if he rolled too many dice because he did lose a rank. But I think we both missed that. So I charge in with my Roll of Faithful. I decide, hey, you know what? It's better to charge and get charged. And I roll a 1. Okay, now I'm automatically in. I'm already in range. The question is, do I use a Davos token for the rerolls? And I decide it is worth rerolling, for the reason that right now I'm hitting on 4s, and if I roll badly here, he may not even use the weakened token and save it for the next attack. If I get rerolls and do a lot of damage on the first swing, at least it's going to force him to take that weakened token off, and I can attack at full power the next attack. So I decided to reroll. I'm down to 1 Davos token. I'm also thinking about, do I use the Red Priestess ability to take a wound and make him panic and vulnerable? The thing is, he's already vulnerable, so I'm only really dealing a panic. And do I really want to take wounds on my own unit that is kind of fragile and marked? But at the end of the day, I decided to go for it. Again, I think this may have been a mistake since the gains were so little. And I'm just maybe tempted to do my, Brawler tricks. So I take the wound, I pass the panic test, that deals a wound back to him because it's Sleaze and Shireen. I roll my attacks, I spend the faith token that I generated, and after the weaken token, I only get a measly 2 hits. He fails both saves after I use the vulnerable token. I don't mind using it only on 1 hit because I know I can make more with Red Priestess. And he rolls for his panic, and he passes, but he takes 3 wounds should he fail. So I'm considering, do I use the panic token at this point? And I decide not to use it, because if he takes 3 more wounds, he's still at 6. He's still at 6 models. He's not necessarily killable, but it's going to make the return attack on his part more damaging. He's going to gain an attack and gain +1 to hit, and I don't want to put this mark unit of Brawl the Faithful at risk. So I decide not to use the panic token. So he's checking if he's within long range. He's checking the range of his units, and I'm really suspecting some sort of coordinated tactics here at this point. He's checking if he charges in with the Mark Raiders, what's the countercharge looking like. Again, he doesn't have to worry about any of that this round. He activates me. He can definitely burn down the clock with his useless activations first. Oh, and after that attack with the Faithful, he actually uses diversion tactics and gets a free maneuver with Mance. And you can see Mance is just, again, shifting towards the left side where he wants to support where the combats are happening. So now on his turn, he decides, okay, the combat's happening on the left, the Marking Raiders pulls back, shifts to the left slightly, and I tap my Davos at this point, off camera kind of, and the other unit of Raiders also backs up. So it's really clear to both of us now that there's no real fighting happening on the right side, and all the fights are going to be happening on the left side. I still have to worry a little bit, though, because if both those units march forward 10, that could put a lot of pressure on me. So I'm now considering, do I shoot into the Spearwives and then do a charging volley and try and finish them off? The thing is, he's got 10 wounds, and I think that, if I get, let's say, 3 hits, and he fails all 3 saves with Vulnerable Token, and then I charge in, let's say I get 6 hits. With the Vulnerable, let's say I kill all 6, which is kind of unlikely. He will have lost 9 models. He'll still have probably 1 guy left. Will he pass Panic? It's going to come down to the Panic test. I'm vicious, but he's near Mance Raider. So he'll be testing on a 7. Odds are in his favor. And if I throw my Bastard Girls in, he can start marking me with Mance in the future, and he can encircle me. So I decide, okay, it's not worth attacking yet. I need a little bit more chip damage. So I activate Stannis. I make the Marking of Raiders more worth 1 point more, and he pushes forward to act as a countercharge unit when those Marking of Raiders go into my Brawl the Faithful. I pivot to make sure the Spearwives can't get into my flank. And I'm now down to just Bastard Girls and the Dragonstone Noble. So it looks like he's thinking about activating the Raiders, and he's got the Vicious card. Oh no, he activates the Cave Dwelling Savages, my bad. So with the Weaken token, he only gets 3 hits, and I fail all 3 saves. My trade's kind of buggy, we'll remove models properly, so we decide to copy it and delete it, and I'm down to 8 models, and I've lost a rank. Now, that's not terrible because I can use a Faith token to deal some extra hits back to him. So even though I'm getting whittled down a little bit, it's not worrisome quite yet. So I'm down to 8, down to 2 ranks. I pass my Panic, which deals a wound to him because it's Sleaze and Shireen, and I generate another Faith token. So now I'm down to Bastard Girls and the Dragonstone Noble. And my whole plan this game, right, was to deal some chip damage, but I realized, you know what? The fight is happening on the left. As much as I could shift to the left and shoot and edge closer, I really need to commit these bastard girls a little more aggressively. So I do a full pivot and I move forward because I'm predicting that this marking of Raiders in the middle is going to charge into the Faithful, and I want lots of counter charge options. If he makes it in, Stannis can make it in, and this unit can also make it in too. I leave a very small gap between Stannis and the forest so that I can see through that gap and get a charging volley through. And now that all the threats have kind of activated, he decides to, let's see, I've got one activation left. Yeah, he's going for the charge. So it's 7 inches to the Raw of the Faithful. And he tragically rolls a 1, stumbles forward, passes his panic, and that really relieves a lot of the damage that I would have taken. And my last activation, I just kind of shuffle my Dragonstone Noble to the side. Again, should he charge into the Bastard Girls, I want to be in a position where I can counter charge in. I've got 12 inches of movement, lots of movement. And it's now all him. He shuffles Mance again further to the left to support the left side. And he plays another Surround and Expose to panic and weaken the Raw of the Faithful. His last unit, the Spearwives, also shuffled to the left, and you can see all the combats now are really happening left side. The right side is more or less being abandoned. My little turtley palisade, he did not fall for the bait, and wisely so. And that's the end of round 4. So at this point, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good because I haven't taken too much damage, and one of his units is about to hopefully get killed by my Dragonstone Noble. So I feel like I can, again, get that point, and then hopefully between Tycho and Sleaze and Shireen just stay alive and eke out a win. So I am first, and I'm really hoping to kill that unit of Raiders. So I activate Tycho. I don't forget my lesson from earlier. Sleaze and Shireen might get countered by a Wilding Diplomacy. Thankfully, he doesn't have it anyway. I take the swords. My Dragonstone Noble attacks. I hit all 3. It's actually 5 hits because I've taken a wound. He makes 3 saves, but with the vulnerable token, he fails all 5. He's now down to just 2 models, and if he fails the panic test, he's dead because of the disorganized rule, but he passes again. And that was a pretty big pass because if I kill that unit, this Dragonstone Noble can also now help out and try and finish off those cave dwellers as well. Alas, it was not meant to be. So over to my opponent. Again, doing a lot of thinking. He takes the envelope, he weakens the Bastard Girls, draws some cards, and influences Mance Raider. Nope, I lied. He influences the Spearwives. I decide, you know what? All I have to do is live. This unit of Raiders is going to go down. I activate Sleaze and Shireen. I influence the Raw of the Faithful, and I heal them up. And I remove the weakening token. I'm not worried about panic because I've got good morale, and Sleaze and Shireen's buffing me anyway. I want to make sure I can deal some damage out. So Styre goes down to the crown, and he influences Mance Raider, and he zaps my Dragonstone Noble, and shockingly, I roll Snake Eyes, which actually kills me because I roll a 2, but thankfully I've got the Azora High from the beginning of the game. I play it, and I only take 1 wound instead, so that came out really, really clutch there. That was a marked unit that he zapped to death on Snake Eyes. Would have zapped to death. So at this point, I'm nervous. I don't know how else he can do an extra wound to me. I don't want those Raiders to activate and get a lucky wound in. So I say, I need to get this point before it's too late. I activate the Noble. I retreat an inch. I charge in. We both know how that works. And I roll. I get 7 hits because I've taken 2 wounds. The unit explodes, and I score 1 point. So now, again, my goal is it's round 5. The faithful are pretty healthy. My Dragonstone Noble surges backwards in a position where he can't get charged in the front, and my only goal is to stay alive. And I think with Tycho and Sleaze and Shireen, I can ride the game out and get a win. So he throws down Val onto the maneuver zone and plays a second Endless Horde, and another Unit of Raiders pops up. And as you can probably imagine, since the combat's all on the left, they will deploy on the left as well. So now that he has more points on the table, it's actually irrelevant at the moment because I'm actually up in victory points. So he is now forced to engage. He's now forced. Not that he wasn't already doing that. He's definitely charging into me anyway, but now he has to do it because he needs to kill a unit. So he throws on Raiders on the far left flank. It's back to me. I don't tap Davos. I realize I don't want the Faithful being tag teamed, so I send Stannis in. Now I roll a 1, and I don't use a Davos token because, again, I don't think the damage is that important. I only get 2 hits. He makes a save, and he passes his panic again. However, I have a big, big misplay here. Again, I know that all I have to do is keep the Raw Faithful alive, my most fragile unit, keep them alive or keep the Dragonstone Noble alive. Right now they're fighting Cave Dwellers one-on-one. That is not that scary. I should have used the Davos token to prevent Distraction Tactics from being played again. Distraction Tactics could allow some tag teaming to occur, and indeed that's what ends up happening. So I saved the Davos token for a charge later on, but he plays Distraction Tactics, and he's able to actually maneuver, I believe, Mance Raider in the second year. Yeah, so he throws down the Distraction Tactics, he maneuvers Mance Raider, and he's just barely able to get into the flank arc of the Raw Faithful. He's actually on the line, and when you're on the line, you get to choose. So now I can get tag teamed. So that puts me at a lot of risk. Had I had the foresight, I would have played that token, and we'll see if that comes to bite me in the butt. How can it not, right? He's not activated yet. He's going to get a flank charge. How can it not? Another thing I could have done to prevent a flank charge as well was I could have put this Dragonstone Noble directly behind the Rawler Faithful, and that would also prevent him from fitting into my flank too. So I really had 2 chances there to stop that from happening. Yeah, so after some precise measuring, he's able to get onto the line, which gives him the option for the flank. So now it's his turn as well. The Distraction Tactics was a response to my charge from Stannis. And so we're checking retreat options here. My Raw Faithful have not activated yet, so we're both checking. If he is to attack me, can I retreat behind the Dragonstone Noble? I can, but I need to roll a 4+, which is definitely dicey. So he decides to go in, and again, luck is on my side. He's automatically in, but he rolls another 1, so the attack is disorderly. So he's got 8 attacks now hitting on 4s, but he rolls subpar, only gets 3 hits, and to rub salt in, I even make a save. I only lose 2 models. It's -3 for Flank and Vicious, but again, I'm morale 3 essentially with Sleaze and Shireen. I pass the test. I deal a wound to the Cave Dweller Savages, whittling them down even more, and I make another Faith Token. Now, I'm considering charging in with the Dragonstone Noble. He does have counter strategy, which can prevent that from happening, but I figure, if I charge in, it's good because I'm going to get 7 hits with Sunring in the flank, but it's bad because I'm going to make a panic test, right? And yes, I'm morale 3, but I'll be testing at -3. I could fail and just die. But secondly, I'm never going to kill that unit, and he's first during the last round. If he takes Swords of Styre, he can just deal that last wound quite easily, and I'm going to lose 3 points. So I decide not to go for the counter charge through the Sentinel Order from the Dragonstone Noble. So he plays Regroup and Reform, heals up the Cave Dweller Savages, who are heavily, marked with a lot of coins here, and moves up the Raiders.
I have left the Dragonstone Noble and the Bastard Girls and the Rawler Faithful. I decide to activate the Bastard Girls. I take a shot into the flank of the marked unit fighting Stannis. He fails 2 saves, passes the panic, and I pass the panic for shooting into combat. Now, I don't charging volley into here because he still has 9 wounds. I only have 6 attacks. I'm weakened, and I'm never going to kill him. And if I do charging volley into combat, he's going to get a shot into charging volley into my flank instead. So I'm just doing some chip damage to hopefully finish him off next round. So Bastards are done. So over to my opponent, he activates the Cave Dwell Savages. He plays Overwhelming Assaults, and because he's got 2 units, he goes for the rerolls to hit and critical blow. So even though he's only got 6 attacks, after all the rerolls, after the crit blow, he gets 6 hits with Sunring. I roll my 6 saves, I fail all of them, and now my unit is all of a sudden very, very crippled. So I'm about to make my panic test, okay? And he plays There's Too Many. He's got 3 units in range, so I'm going to take a -3 test, and it's going to be +3 damage, which will just kill me. So I'm testing on a 6. Now that's pretty reliable, but I'm also panicked. And don't forget, I threw away my other Azora High, so I can't auto-pass. So I roll, and the first roll kills me anyway, so my unit is dead. Now, it's worth 4 points, and I'm really hemming and hawing on whether or not I should use Sleaze and Shireen. And the thing is, I can bring him back, but they're surrounded by 2 units who are pretty healthy, and it doesn't seem like a great choice. And then I realize, oh wait, I do have Tycho. I can heal them up 5 wounds. So I decide, it's late into the game. If I can just stay alive, I can maybe win this out. So I do decide to pop Sleaze and Shireen, and I keep the unit alive. I'm alive with 2 wounds, and I decide to play Final Strike. Now, playing Final Strike is very risky because he's got counter strategy from Mance Raider. But I don't see a position where I'm going to be able to use it. And thankfully for me, this is a huge moment in the game. The real TSM turning point. He rolls a 1, which means that he fails and the Final Strike goes off. We checked the wording on both cards, and it turns out that even though I'm still alive with 2 wounds, he did deal 9 wounds to me, so his unit's going to take 9 full hits back. So again, it was a risky play. I shouldn't rely on the Final Strike going through, but again, I'm never going to get a lot of value out of this card in the future. I might as well give it a shot, even though I'm expecting it to fail. So we both agree that despite healing 2 wounds from Sleaze and Shireen, he does take the 9 hits, he rolls 9 saves, and he fails all of them, and his unit is now crippled itself. And again, they're worth 3 extra points should they die. I decide, okay, this is my chance to get some big points here. I activate the Faithful. I play the Sustained Assault I had from the beginning of the game. I now count as fighting at full ranks. I spend a token, looks like, to make sure I get the precision hits in. And I roll 2 6s, and they're just dead. And I score 5 points just like that, and now I'm up 6-0. Now, even though I've got a huge lead, I can't really get too comfortable because this marked unit of my own, the Faithful, are about to get killed by his Followers of Bone with his commander. That's going to put 4 points back in his pocket, and the game's going to be 6-4. Still very close, and I've got a 1 wound Dragonstone Noble not far from that unit as well. So I'm feeling good, but the game is by no means over. So at this point, I think I tap Davos because I don't think there's anything important to do. And I attack with the Faithful. So it's his activation. And again, his Spearwives are his next most important unit. He's definitely going to activate Raiders, and the Raiders just kind of stay out of combat, stay out of danger range, stay way at the back. I've got my Dragonstone Noble left, and again, I know there's no combats happening on this side, so I just kind of move him around a little bit to protect the flank of the Bastard Girls. Again, I'm having some trouble with my ability to pivot. And I spend a lot of time trying things out. I realize if I go in the front, I can actually get attacked by the Spearwives. So I decide that's not a good idea. and we decide, okay, it's too dangerous to just go forward too far, and I end up, being very, very cautious and just kind of moving to the side of the bastard girls. But again, it's super awkward because of the lag. The movement is very awkward for me right now. So it's, almost 3 hours of play, and at this point, I'm getting a little bit sloppy. So I guard the flank of the bastard girls, but I don't really check the angles for my noble. He also gets deleted there by accident, so I just copy and paste and put him back in position. And I feel like I'm happy with that positioning, and my opponent says, okay, great, I'm going to just punch forward 10, and we check the angles, and he's actually in my flank. There was no need for that, so that was a bit of a sloppy positioning on my part. The good news for me is that he has to go on that low wall, and the low wall will pretty much counter all of his bonuses for charging me. So I'm fully activated now, and he's got his Spearwives left, essentially, and his Raiders fighting Stannis. So he wants to put himself in a position where next round, when he goes first, he can take the swords, get a shot. Oh, and you'll notice that in between activations, I also popped my Tycho to heal up the faithful. Now, I can heal 5 wounds of Tycho. I decided to heal 2 wounds on the Dragon's Noble to bring him back to full health, and I put the remaining 3 on the faithful. The reason why I split the wounds up this way is because I'm up 6-0. If he's to attack me with Mance into the flank, even if I healed all 5 wounds, a bad panic test means they die anyway, and it's only going to put them to 4 points. As long as I don't lose anything else, the game is mine. I want to keep that Dragon's Noble alive if I can, so he's back to full health. And yeah, he's checking the Spearwives to see if he can get behind his Raiders so that he can get a free shot, potentially into a charging volley to finish off those Rawler Faithful. And we can see here that he can easily get that shift into a shot, into a charge. Yeah, no problem. All right, so that's the end of round 5. So entering round 6, I've had to use one of my assets, Sleaze and Shireen, and I've used Tycho. So now the goal is just to stay alive with what I have on the table. Again, it's 6-0, but again, I expect to lose that faithful unit, so it's closer than it looks. So round 6, my opponent is in position to do that shot. He's thinking about starring the swords, and he decides, you know what, it's probably better to leave that option for the charging volley for later. And he does end up taking starring the swords, but he decides to attack in the flank with Mance Raider instead. So 8 attacks with Sundering go off. I've got 5 models left. So here I make a really big error. I've got a Faith token left, and I just think to myself, this unit is pretty much dead. I might as well use the Faith token. And I deal him 3 hits because I'm only missing 1 rank. And he fails all 3 saves, he loses 3 models. This is a really big blunder on my part. What is 3 wounds going to do to this unit? I completely forgot that the Faithful, their third ability, means that when they die, another Faithful unit within long range can make an attack. That means Stannis' unit, which counts as Faithful because of Stannis' rules, can do more damage to that marked unit of Raiders and potentially score me more points down the road. So that's a huge blunder on my part. So I spend the token, he rolls his 8 dice, he gets 5 hits, I've got 5 models left, I make 1 save, I barely hold on. I'm now making a panic test at -3 for Vicious in the flank. I roll a 10, I'm good, but I'm panicked. He makes me re-roll. And I fail. The unit is dead, and he scores 4 VPs, and he's more or less back in the game. This unit has Sundering, so a charge into my Dragon's Noble can easily, can for sure kill him on 1 bad spike. Oh, so I decided there to use the counter charge option, and just to deny him a charge, and he was able to stop it with his counter strategy from Mance. So he's trying to position himself to have lots of options. He can charge Stannis, he can charge the Dragon's Noble, and he realizes he's a bit too far away from the Spearwives. He wants to use that Coordination Tactics card. I just assume he's had it. He's gone through so many cards of his deck at this point. And he's a bit far away, so with his Surge 4th, He remeasures, checks, and he decides to just get a little bit closer while leaving the same options open and available to himself. At this point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just have to keep that Dragonstone Noble alive. Maybe I'll just march behind Stannis and angle myself to where I can't get charged. But before I can do that, my opponent plays his second predictable maneuvers. And he chooses one of my NCUs, he chooses the Dragonstone Noble, and now I cannot march away into safety. So what I do is I activate Tycho, I weaken the Balls of Bone to blunt their damage, and I draw some cards. At the start of his turn, I play Test of Faith, and I think to myself, what a brilliant play this is, because he's got Sundering, but the Test of Faith will counter off the Sundering. However, that is cheating on my part because you can't play Test of Faith on a non-brawler unit. So I pass the Panic Test to play it, and I attach it on, and my opponent's like, oh crap, he's back to a 2+ save essentially. But this is actually a mistake. I'm not allowed to do this. The good news is, spoiler alert, it ends up not mattering. So I take the envelope, my opponent's considering other charge options now that I've got the Test of Faith up. Stannis is also fairly tanky. Oh, and last round he did not activate or did not attack with this unit of Raiders. And that's smart for him because of Counter-Strike. If he's going to miss some of his attacks, he's just going to deal more hits to himself. So he did activate them, but he just chose not to attack because it would only deal more damage to himself. And I got Test of Faith up on Stannis' unit as well. They have a 2+ save. He's not doing any damage to me. He'll just do more damage to himself. So in response, my opponent, with 3 NCUs, 2 more to go, throws down Ygritte onto the Wealth Zone, and she influences the Spearwives and removes the weaken off the Followers of Bone and heals them up as well. So I'm now feeling safe with that Dragonstone Noble because of Test of Faith, which shouldn't really be there. And I put Davos onto the maneuver zone, again, to close off any other moon shenanigans he might have and to back my Dragonstone Noble up. Again, nothing else really needed to move too badly. Maybe I should have instead moved the other Dragonstone Noble because this one's still in charge range. Maybe it's not an automatic charge though. So again, I'm not too worried about this charge from him. So we both agree he's on the line, so it's in the flank. He charges in, but again, because of the low wall, the Fortified rule counters out his flank bonus, and he doesn't get rerolls either. So he only gets 1 hit, I make my save, and I auto-pass my panic. This position is actually not legal, but it's the last round of the game, it's not going to matter, so I don't quibble over it. So I activate my Bastard Girls. I can still draw a thin line between the Forest and Stannis. I shoot. I get 3 kills. He passes his panic, and I charging volley into him. Now, I had asked him if he wants to use the weaken on the shot. He said no. Of course, it's probably better to use the weaken onto the melee combat, but I had an Artisan of Fury, which means that I'd be hitting on 2. So I was really happy that I didn't weaken the shot. Hitting on 2s of rerolls is still going to be very good in my favor. So I miss none after the rerolls. He spends the weaken token, and I roll 3 1s and only get 3 hits. But the good news is, with those 3 hits, he fails all 3 saves, but more importantly, he finally fails a panic, takes 4 wounds from it, and the unit is dead. So now I've scored 3 extra points. Now I took 4 points out of that, but it should have been 3. That unit is worth 2 because they're insignificant and they're marked, and they got 1 point more. So I should have been only up 9-4 at this point, not 10-4. And I'm really pleased now. I figure, okay, even if he kills that Dragonstone Noble, he's not going to be able to tie me. My goal now is just to stay alive, and I'm feeling like I'm in a good position to do that. So I pivot Stannis after that kill to make sure that the Falls of Bone or the Spears are in my front. And my opponent, is feeling at this point a bit like he's got to make some rash moves to get back in the game. He decides to go for the charge onto the Dragonstone Noble. He makes it in. He's got 8 attacks. I've got 3 wounds on a 2+ save. He hits 6 of them, and he had played Coordination Tactics to gain the Coordination Assault of the Spearwives. So those 6 hits actually became 9 hits. I roll my 9 dice, and justice is done. I roll 3 ones. I shouldn't have had that test of faith anyway, so I'm glad that it ended up not mattering. So the Dragonstone Noble dies, and it's now 10-8, because he also marked that unit when Mance activated. Again, it should really be 9-8, but, the point is it's a very, very close game, right? But again, I'm like, okay, how can he get another kill? I've got 2 trades that are healthy. He's pretty far away from me. How can he possibly get a kill on me? And this is when I activate Stannis, and I go, okay, well, I'm going to try and keep Stannis safe. I'm going to back up and put myself out of range of danger. This was a stupid move on my part. Stannis is at full health. He's got Test of Faith. He's not going to take a lot of damage from anything. I should have moved him forward to block the Bastard Girls, to prevent them from getting double-teamed by the Spearwives and the Raiders. The Raiders, I thought, were out of the game, and I completely forgot that he still has Val to activate. Val can give them a free maneuver that will put them easily within striking range. So backup stance was a cowardly move, and I should have really used it to prevent a double charge happening on the Bastard Girls. So now we're both realizing, oh crap, the game is still afoot. We think it's 10-8, but if the Mark Raiders can finish off the Bastard Girls after the Spearwives charge, it'll be 10-10. He has more points on the table. He's going to win the game. In actuality, it would have been 10-9 for him anyway. But the point is, if the Mark unit can finish me off, it's game over. So he also knows that the Dragonstone Noble, who's not yet activated, can free retreat and then march. So this is, again, very powerful flexibility. And he's wondering, what can I do? Can I charge into him? Can I charge block? So again, he does not need to do this important activation yet. He just activates his unit Raiders, and now it's down to my very last activation. And I roll a 4 for the retreat, so I'm allowed to retreat 8 inches. And this is now the puzzle. And I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes to think about, how do you keep the game from going to a draw? How do I prevent the marked unit of Raiders from killing either the Dragonstone Noble or the Bolton Bastard Girls? Don't forget that they have the Sundering card, so they do pose a legitimate threat. How do I guarantee it from not happening? I mean, one could argue that if he charges into the Dragonstone Noble with only 6 attacks, he's unlikely to do it anyway, but how can I really minimize the damage? So pause the video here if you're so inclined and think about what would be the best play. Because definitely I thought about this long and hard during the game. So I think about, okay, the retreat can take me to here, and I can easily march to block a double charge happening on my Bastard Girls. I'm more worried about them at the time because they have weaker armor and they have worse morale. And I realized, this is not great, because Val can actually move the Spearwives into my flank. They can take a shot into the flank of the Dragonstone Noble. They can take a shot, charging volley into the Dragonstone Noble. If the stars align, he'll do exactly 2 wounds to me, and that will allow his Raiders to charge in and finish me off. In this position, if he uses Val here on the Spearwives, he can't use Val on the Raiders, but it turns out that he's within 10 inches and he can do a 5+ charge. I mean, why not, right? It's not impossible. 1 in 3 is not the worst odds in the world. So I decided, okay, that's not great for me because I can see a path for him to get that extra VP. And I decided and said, you know what? Okay, let's do something else. We're also doing a lot of math. We're like, okay, will a double attack even kill the Bastard Girls? And it turns out to be really, really close. It's going to come down to me failing Panic. I can't remember at this point if he's played a second. There's too many. And I do have Oath of Duty up with a token, so I do take 1 less wound. But again, if he rolls high, if I roll low, it's possible. What are the best ways to minimize the damage? So I decided, okay, instead of blocking the front of the Bastard Girls, what I'll do instead is I'm going to use my retreat to put my Dragonstone Noble just barely in front and to the side of the unit instead. And what this is going to do for me is, it'll prevent a double charge happening because he can't fit 2 trays in the front, and it's going to maximize the distance between the Raiders and the Dragonstone Noble. This way, he either uses Val on this unit, which prevents him from using Val to maneuver his Spearwives to get a shot into a charging volley into the Bastard Girls. So I'm just trying to make it so that he can only attack each unit with 1 thing, not both. I can't get tag teamed. I'm just trying to not get tag teamed here. Yeah, so you can't charge me in the front with 2 units. And I decide, okay. And I didn't realize either that I'm in the forest, meaning that if he was to charge me with those raiders, it negates his sundering bonus anyway. So I'm back to a 2+ save. So he doesn't have any choices left. He activates the Spear Wives. He checks his charges. He could make it to the Dragonstone Noble in the front, but he's not loving that it's a far charge. In hindsight, he should have gone for it. He ends up deciding to go for the Bastard Girls, but he cannot kill that unit. It's impossible. So he should have gone for the Hail Mary. And maybe what's stopping him is maybe a bad angle could have prevented his Raiders from getting in. But yeah, there's no way he can kill the Bastard Girls. He goes for the charge. He needed a 3. He rolls a 2. So he doesn't make it. He passes the panic, which is irrelevant at this point. He activates Val. He's 12 inches away. He maneuvers forward 5. He needs a 2 to get in. He makes it in, but again, he's only got 6 attacks. The Sundering is negated by the Fortified rule. He gets 4 hits. I've got a 2+ save. I could roll badly, but I don't. I make all my saves, and I survive. So the game's over. Technically, it's 9-8, and I do feel bad because if it was the actual score, my opponent may have considered other options. So at the end of the game, I told him, I realized that when you played Endless Horde round 1, I don't know if that was like a strategy of yours, but I was now pressured to attack you since you have more points on the table. And he very nonchalantly said, oh, I know. He said, I could have done this. He said, I could have deployed way further back. And, you, that is me, I was in a defensive position. I wasn't inclined to move forward. He could have hung back till the end of the game, and then round 5 or round 6, played the Endless Horde, summoned a unit of Raiders, and then he's got more points on the table, and he wins. If I didn't pick up on that, that's like a default victory for him. Now, if I did pick up on that possibility, I'm forced to now leave my palisade and move towards him, where he can easily start wrapping around and providing those 2-on-1 combats in the flank and the front. But he chose not to do that. He said, you know what, it wasn't going to be very interesting. I wanted to have a more fun game, a more aggressive game, so he deliberately pushed forward with some units. So I don't want to make it sound like he gave me the win. He definitely was very precise, very careful, very calculating. But by moving forward, he gave me the opportunity to win. So he was very aware that he could have been way more ruthless. He chose not to make it a more exciting game. So I'm, obviously happy with how it worked out. It was definitely close and dicey. Again, the first 3 rounds was just positioning, but the last 3 were pretty explosive. I hope you enjoyed the game as well. Again, I don't pretend to be the most learned Baratheon player, and if you saw some cool moves that could have been done instead from a Free Folk or Baratheon point of view, please comment, let me know, and I hope you really enjoyed the video. I do encourage any other players out there to create videos like this. I think it's such a neat way to learn more about the game through analysis, and I really hope that other people hop onto it. So let me know if you like what you saw. Maybe I will be invited to make more in the future. So thanks again, folks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.